Welcome to For Your Amusement, a theme park podcast that aims to exhaustively evaluate the world's most popular theme park attractions to determine if they are world class. I'm Ryan Bergara.
I'm Byron Marin.
And for today's featured attraction, we don't actually cover an attraction. We cover a whole theme park. And that's right, it's Knott's Scary Farm. We're going to take a peek behind the curtain of Knott's Scary Farm, or as I like to call it, the original title, Knott's Halloween Haunt. And that's, of course, only in Buena Park, California. There is no other Halloween Haunt. There's no other Knott's Scary Farm anywhere in the world. And joining us today in the Tiki Room is none other than one of the lead maze designers, Gus Krueger. Thank you so much for joining us in the Tiki Room.
Happy to be here.
And as always, please like and subscribe if you're watching the video version over on youtube.com/@FYAPod, or if you're listening to the audio version, subscribe and rate the podcast 5 stars, and consider supporting us on our fourth wall, which is basically a more creator-friendly version of Patreon. You can join our fourth wall and become a park hopper, as we're calling it, by heading over to FYAPod.com. Not only will help us keep this madness going, but it will also gain you access to up to 3 monthly bonus shows in addition to this free one. Let's just hop right in. Gus, how long have we known each other now?
Oh, man. It was first year of Dark Entities, so about 6 years now.
Yeah, it feels...
2018 was the first year of that.
2018 was the first year of Dark Entities?
Yeah.
My God. If you didn't know, Gus has designed some real bangers over the years. It's kind of crazy because I'm such a haunt head that I view mazes as like films, essentially. So like I'm like sitting next to like one of the greatest directors in the world, in my opinion. Dark Entities was like an amazing maze. It was kind of like in the alien theme. Would have been great actually this year with Romulus coming out.
It would have been pretty fun, but you know, it's just these things get old, man. Got to come up with something new.
I guess that normally we would, at this point of the show, we would say, why are we having somebody on the show, why they chose this topic to talk about. But obviously, since you're here, we're going to get some amazing behind the scenes insight on this year's event, but also the events of Yesterworld. And I'm really stoked to talk about it. You're going to be sitting here for 4 hours. I hope you don't have anything left. I'm just kidding.
I hope you don't have like a really important event to prep for or anything.
All I got to say to my daughter is I'm sorry I won't be able to pick you up today.
That's right. This is actually being filmed in late August. So we are mere weeks away from the event's opening. When you guys are listening to this, it's going to be October 8th. You guys will be, hopefully you have gone or you're thinking about going. And on that note, we're going to try and keep the spoilers light here for this year's event. We're going to give you some tidbits, but this is going to be more of a preview of this year's event as opposed to a full-on review. We will be reviewing it eventually over on FYAPod.com as part of our bonus podcast, but for now, it's going to be a hopefully mostly spoiler-free discussion. I'll try and make sure that I'll warn you guys if something is coming up.
Just bleep me out.
Yeah, I'm just going to bleep your voice the entire podcast.
That's fine.
But as such, we're not going to be doing the world-class tests this episode because we're going to be leaning into the behind the scenes, the preview. And we also asked you guys questions on our Instagram that we're going to be asking Gus now. And he's going to answer every single one of them. He's at gunpoint under this table. I have one of those Django Unchained guns just strapped, pointing right at his crotch. But without
I believe that was Inglourious Bastards, wasn't it?
Was it Inglourious Bastards?
The gun under the table.
He had me at crotch.
I mean, it's a common trope. I mean, Star Wars.
Hey, look,
as well.
whatever movie it's from, there's a crotch gun, and I got one on you too, Byron. So why don't you take it easy before you mouth off?
You asked me to say goodbye to my Nazi balls.
Yeah, that's right. But of course, we're also going to cover history and fun facts as we always do. But without further ado, let's just quickly talk about our first impressions of Knott's Scary Farm and what kind of got you all into this. And Gus, it's crazy. I've now known you for 6 years. We haven't been able to do anything together, so this is awesome. Other than like just hanging out. But I've never asked you what got you into all of this.
Man, it's a pretty silly story, to be honest. I actually studied TV and film.
Okay.
So perfect sense, right, that I'm doing what I'm doing. I was kicking around doing odd jobs. I think I was working at a Best Buy at the time.
Yeah.
I had some buddies that I worked at a comic book distributor for. I'm really selling myself here.
Yeah.
But one of my buddies had worked seasonally as a talent at Haunt, and he kept trying to get me to come out. He's like, hey, man, come down, do the thing. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Sounds dumb. So eventually one of those years I was like, I got nothing else going on. Let's go for it. So I went down and I auditioned, and it was late in the run and I didn't get a role. Yeah. I thought, oh, that's dumb. Okay, I'm done.
You could audition like mid-run?
Back in the 90s, yes.
Okay.
In my day, but yeah, no, it wasn't mid-run, but it was very close to the event, and a lot of the roles had been filled. So when I did the audition, they were probably looking for a very specific thing, and I didn't fit it, so I didn't get a part. So I was like, I got other stuff going on. It's not the hugest deal.
Yeah.
A few years later, he hits me up again. He's like, hey, come on down. It's, it's changed, all of that stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. You run around, be a monster. It's going to be awesome. I'm like, oh, okay, that actually, all right, you sold me now. And that was the year 2000. I just went down. Actually, my brother and I went down there. We just sort of walked into Knott's employment. It tells you how different the time is. And they just said, like, hey, we'd love to be haunt talent. Yeah. So walked in there. They said, this is what's available. And I said, okay, that sounds great. We'll do that. And it was, I got cast in the maze Elvira's Nightmares.
Oh.
So I was a skeleton guy in Elvira's Nightmares in the year 2000. And it was a lot of fun. It was very silly. Like I said, it was weird for me because I wasn't coming in from the, a lot of these people, it's very much, their whole year is built up around this event. And I was just coming in like, these guys are way into it. Like some of them to the point of, my gosh, do you have anything else going on? But
hey, man, I get it.
No, I think one of the reasons probably why you had a hard time the first time with the audition is they have such a high return rate, or at least that's what they claimed during the early 2000s. Oh no,
they definitely, especially way back then, it was the only game in town. It really was. It was extremely hard. It was, people would be lining up. So yeah, I started as a talent way back when.
So you mean to tell me that you never attended the event as a fan first?
I actually did not.
That is bananas to me.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Because like, me, I mean, we'll get into me in a second. I'm obsessed with this stuff, and I've only pretty much experienced it as a fan. So
yeah, I think it was just, how do we pry me away from my video games at the time? Really.
I see. Okay.
So no, but I was more like a concert kid. I would just go to, tons of metal punk shows and all that stuff way back when. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
So it wasn't a matter of lack of want. It's just that my little immediate group of people weren't actively going. And, my friends at the time, it wasn't a thing that they really did or invited me to. Gotcha. So it just sort of, and really there was just sort of Knotts. There wasn't so many. So it just was easy to miss, I guess.
No, were you into theme parks at large?
Oh, absolutely. Huge theme park fan.
Okay. So it was only haunts that you had not gone to, and specifically Knott's because it was the only game in town at that point.
Yeah. And, when I had been, I grew up as local Southern California kid. So it was very much Disney Knott's all the time. And, that was just regular patron of those things. And my family was from Western New York. So I'd seen like the haunted houses back there. We'd gone in like Niagara Falls area, like tourist traps. So we'd done that stuff, but no, I hadn't really done it. But yeah, it was like the first year I'm like, okay, I get it. This is a lot of fun. I'm in now. Yeah. And at the time I was, actually sort of doing a little sort of side, improv show with my friends. Just like we would occasionally do some shows, and I sort of did tech for them there. So I had enough chops to the following year when I came back, I was like, well, I could try out for the build crew. Right. So I started my second year with Knotts. I started on the carpentry crew, and I built mazes from there. And then the next year after that, like a couple of years after that, I had found my way over to the props crew. So I was building the mazes and then working as a performer. I took a couple of years off, and then I came back. And then from what year was that? 2006 on, I've been there nonstop.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so I stopped working as a talent around.
You're still a talent.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
In the non-industry terms.
Yes. But I stopped working, goofball. But no, I stopped working full-time as a performer as one of our monsters around 2012 or 13 or so. And since then, but
what was your last maze?
The last maze I worked was...
Oh, were you working streets at that point?
I worked streets. The mazes I worked were Elvira's Nightmares, into Malice in Wonderland.
Oh my God, that's a classic, Malice in Wonderland.
Then Blood Bayou.
Oh my God, I loved Blood Bayou too.
The Asylum.
Oh my God, I love that one too.
No, I worked in some really good ones. I worked in Hatchet High was the final one.
Hatchet High, one of my favorite ones in the Wilderness Dance Hall.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. But after that, I went... I went up to Street Monster. So I did spend some time in CS. I spent some time in Silver Bullet when that was a thing.
It's a thing this year again, right?
Silver Bullet. It kind of just, Forsaken Lake. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
It sort of turned into that for a while. I mean, we had the swamp. Yeah. And then the swamp turned into just Silver Bullet. And then Silver Bullet got eaten by Ghost Town. So they assimilated that.
As things often do.
Ghost Town gets hungry.
It does get hungry. And it gobbles me up every year.
But yeah, so then I worked, when Silver Bullet got assimilated into Ghost Town, like my last season or two, I worked as a Ghost Town talent.
God, Hatchet High. Hatchet High, I forget what year that was. I feel like it was 03, 04 or something like that.
2003 was the first year because at the same time I was doing double duty. So we decorated it the first year in the props team.
I just remember that maze scaring the shit out of me. Everyone really got, because I was only like, I think 12 or 13 at the time.
Just the idea of high school in general.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I wasn't even in high school yet. So I was like, this is what high school's like. I'm going to get fucking murdered by a hatchet.
Yeah, it's this huge frog is going to dissect you.
Exactly.
I mean, it happens.
It seems like you were in bangers only. Like,
I actually,
not to say that there are, I mean, obviously look, some mazes aren't going to be the best mazes. And it feels like the ones that you were just named are all the really memorable ones.
And I've designed some of those that weren't the best mazes, but
that can't be true.
No comment.
Now in your scare heyday, do you have like a Mount Rushmore of like scare moments that you're like super proud of?
It's really just the goofy moments between friends that are like the ones that really stick out. It was always a big thing. Like if you get somebody to pee themselves, like that's Yahoo! We did that. We had some people
you would scream like Mario after you made someone pee.
Absolutely. I mean, like, and then you jump up, you hit the coin, you get a little coin.
I guarantee you're making Ryan pee right now.
He probably
bringing up those mazes you worked in. I'm like, I could feel something on the carpet.
It's my urine. It's my hot urine.
That's how he powers up.
Just power through the smell.
With the terrifying nature of today's featured attraction, you're probably going to need all the help you can get when it comes to getting a good night's sleep. And why not start with your bed sheets? Traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat. It can lead to acne, allergies, and stuffy noses. And, it's just gross. Miracle Made offers a whole line of self-cleaning antibacterial bedding such as sheets, pillowcases, and comforters that prevent up to 99.7% of bacteria growth and require up to 3 times less laundry. Using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter the weather. So you get a better sleep every night. Miracle sheets are also luxuriously comfortable, without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. So stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/FYA to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code FYA at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/FYA and use the code FYA to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/FYA to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Now back to the show.
I remember watching, and this is going to come up at some point in this podcast, I watched the Season of Screams documentary.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I purchased it, I think in 2003 or whatever year. The first year it came out, I remember seeing it in the gift shop, and I was so excited to buy that. And I wore that DVD out to the point where it doesn't play anymore.
Oh, how funny. I'm in that for like a half a second. Like one of those random clips of monsters running by.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That makes sense to that, like, crazy music they put in that. It's like that ding, 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 ding. But there's a guy.
If you have a time code, let us know. It's like 3 hours long.
It's a long,
literally like a boop. Yeah,
It's not known for its brevity, but I will say that there is a guy in there. His name is Bob Vernon, and he has some of the funniest lines I've ever heard in a documentary. And he talks about this one time where he scares somebody, and he's like, "Oh, I've scared somebody once before that they passed out, but I've never scared 2 people before that there was a double pass out."
Now, I'd scared people so they passed out, but I'd never scared 2 people at the same time so there was a double pass out.
And you talking about making someone pee reminded me so much of Bob Vernon. I would love to meet that guy.
It's really just the guests do it to themselves. Like they find ways. You jump out and you scare them. Like watching you scare somebody in a black hall and then put their head down and just start running. You're like, oh, that's not going to go well.
No.
And literally it's just you watch people run head first into a wall and you're like, well, sorry, but I'm gonna duck back a little.
Get back into my little boo hole.
And I'm gonna chuckle under my mask. So yeah, it's like, are you okay? Okay.
Really quickly before we move, because this is actually like a new format for us. We don't often get to talk to somebody who's designing the attraction that we're talking about, which is an amazing honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
So we're just kind of geeking out a little bit up top to ask you some questions. We are going to get to your guys' questions later in the podcast, and we are going to get into some history pretty soon here. But just for my own sake, can you actually list out all the mazes you've designed?
Simultaneously, while I was working as a monster, I was also working in the props crew.
Gotcha.
And a few years into that, I actually started running the crew. So so in the props crew, so if you're like a theater guy or whatever, props at Scary Farm is way different than, props in this. It's more like the art director role of, obviously the maze designer is the art director, but we kind of co-art direct, but we're really the props crew at Not Scary Farm. They decorate the entire thing. So carpentry builds all of that stuff. Paint comes in and makes the walls beautiful, but props is the one that fleshes it all out. So it's not, props isn't the sense of like, hey, here's a hand prop. Props does all of that decor, all the crazy stuff you see.
Yeah.
So I had been doing that for a while. And one of our designers had actually left the company. And at the time we had a maze, Dia de los Muertos, over in Bumper Cars.
I remember that play. That was a great maze. Wasn't that 3D at one point?
Yeah, it was
3D paint. Yeah.
It was 3D though. Yeah, its whole run, it was 3D. But at the time I was, I had been running the props department for about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, all right, what's the next challenge? So when that guy left, I went to my boss at the time and said, hey, if you don't have someone to oversee that, I'd love to just do that, because I know it's pretty much just a simple rehang and it's just in that, but I'd love to do that. So she looked at me and she said, oh, so you want to design? I was like, well, yeah, sure. I mean, okay. And she's like, okay, well, could you design this sign for me real quick? And I don't know if it was like a test of like whatever.
Wait, she just handed you a notebook and was just like,
it was basically like, hey, here's this file, like try to tweak this. So I I adjusted the font and did some stuff. She was like, look at it. She's like, okay, cool. Yeah, you can do that.
That's great.
I was like,
that's insane.
I was like, okay. So, but
that's like me saying like, oh, I act, and then be like, oh, do a monologue right now. And I'd be like, oh.
Literally, it was. And I think, and there's more to it than that, obviously. It was Laura Hanneman was the boss at the time. And I think she had seen me come up through the ranks and she knew I could be trusted with the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was that weird thing that doesn't seem real, that like, hey, you're the guy that worked your way up through the process.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because it's rarely does it happen. But for me, thankfully, luckily it did. And I'm still able to do this stuff. But
well, that's what I like about Knott's, is that it's so legacy based, it seems like.
Yeah, we try. We definitely try to
earn your stripes.
And just be cognizant of where we came from and what we do and build on it.
That's awesome.
So I started, that was 2012, and I took over. So for my first few years, I really was more of a, I don't want to say like, it sounds weird, but like sort of a fixer kind of thing, or like this other designer has the new thing. So I would take over something old and look at like, hey, this room doesn't quite work. So in that time, my first year I did Dia de los Muertos. Oh boy, I really butchered that. Sorry, everybody out there. But I did the Dia Maze, and then I got End Games as well.
Okay.
And I did the log ride and the mine ride. So I wound up just going from nowhere. I had all of this crazy responsibility.
What was the log ride's theme? Because I know we had like, there was like Blood Moon Massacre, and then there was
we were coming out of that era, and it was like we were looking to do something new in both log ride and mine, but we were thinking the verdict or edict rather from management was like, hey, how do we do something that's a little simpler
without talent and stuff inside, or no?
Yeah, we were trying to shy away. We did have minimal talent, but at that time we still did have some people. So I had said,
and by the way, for those listening, talent we're referring to the monsters, like scare actors in the maze.
Yeah. That's our performers, yeah.
We're not saying the maze was talentless. You can't see it, but Gus just shrugged and he was like, I don't know.
I was pointing at myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So we were looking at how do we keep them more props focused. So I had come up with the idea that, hey, okay, let's do skeletons in a log ride, because skeletons are always fun. I mean, who doesn't want to see a bunch of cool skeletons?
Everyone has one.
Yeah, everybody has one.
You start one, you end with one.
That's true. And they're just fun. They're so versatile, right? So I
guess unless you died in like a horrible fire, in which case at a certain like threshold, I do think your bones melt. Anyways, continue.
But you probably have a little bit left.
I think you would have teeth. Apparently teeth are hard to get rid of, or so I'm told.
I want to just keep brushing them.
Byron keeps mouthing off. I'm going to test that theory from scratch.
You kids. But yeah, so we did I had an idea that we would do like a skeleton thing and then like a ghost thing in the mine ride. So just keep it relatively simple. But eventually, so the mine ride morphed into what became the Witch's Keep, which was a Green Witch based thing. So for me, at that time, we were sort of looking at what are the origin, like that was the 40th era was really Green Witch focused. So we had the tricksters and stuff. And I'm kind of like, hey, where did the tricksters start? So
you love those guys.
So like, I kind of came up with this, like, hey, maybe, you know, when Sarah Marshall got, you know, pushed out of Calico, she went and found power in the mine ride. And that's sort of like turned the miners into her first tricksters kind of deal.
Her name was Sarah Marshall.
That's right.
And still is.
And then she went to Hawaii.
That's right. This is before she broke up with Jason Segel.
Yeah, we forgot about that.
Nice.
Thank you.
Nice.
But yeah, so the log ride, actually, I had been developing this thing, but then Sony came to us and they said, hey, we want to get Evil Dead in the parks. And then my boss came to me and said, hey, now you're going to do an Evil Dead layover for the log ride. But it was based on the new Evil Dead. So we didn't have Ash, and we so we went down to Sony, checked it all out, and we kind of did like the new characters, but no one would have known who they were. So we kind of had one of the guys was a chainsaw guy that people were like, that's Ash, but sort of not Ash. It was an interesting thing. And it was faithful to the new one, but no one had seen it because then the release date of the new one got pushed back.
Is it more difficult for you when you're working with an IP in terms creatively because you're not given essentially like a blank canvas? You have to kind of play within a world, or is it kind of nice to have the guide rails?
Like bowling. I wouldn't say it's more difficult. It's not. It's fun, but it's not as creatively fulfilling, you know. And now, especially with where we are now, we're all about creating our own IP and growing what we are as a park. So
I wish Hollywood was like that.
I wish Disney was more like that.
It's like a little choir of people. I wish my father was like that.
Oh boy. Well, luckily though, I mean, we have that ability to have created this, and we have like you said before, just the legacy of what Not Scary Farm is over 50 years now. Like we're able to build on that and create on that. And, you know, even last year we were able to, with the Chilling Chambers maze, we introduced this new character who's the keeper, who's the not so much historian, but he's the person that is the custodian of all of these old mazes. They just go to live in his domain. So we're able to play with that history in a way
over the chamber, right?
Yeah. Like each chamber is an access to history, Knott's history. So that was really cool. But yeah, I much prefer creating and, you know, we'll probably get into it, but my new maze this year is just entirely out of my head. And it's wild what we're able to do there just because.
You've been working on, you had this idea, what, 5 years ago, you said?
It's been a while, yeah.
I read that in the OC Register.
Oh, you checked out Brady's article. I see. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. No, it was an idea that kicked around in the back of my head. And, you know, we got a lot of ideas, man. That's what we do. And it really was just like, hey, it finally was like, oh no, I found my hook, right?
Yeah.
So pursued it, and management said, hey, let's take that a little further and see what that looks like. And, you know, September 19th, everybody gets to check it out.
It's also fun preparing for this podcast, this particular episode, researching one of your friends. It's reading articles because it's like I can just call you and be like, but I think it's funnier to try and Sean Evans your ass and be like,
I was stalking you the other day. Well, alrighty.
8 years ago on your Instagram. Yeah. What happened this night?
8 years ago on my Instagram was probably me taking pictures of action figures, to be honest with you.
That sounds like a good time.
The good old days.
Byron, let's go to your first impression of Not Scary Farm as a roundabout way to get to that. Because Byron, this is actually the audience's first introduction into you as it pertains to haunts. And you are not a scaredy cat, but you definitely...
I wouldn't say scaredy cat.
You definitely were skittish when it came to this kind of stuff.
No, I was for sure a scaredy. Yeah. I didn't want to do anything with horror. Like, you know, I grew up in South Orange County, so...
The rough streets.
Most of the people you knew, and the rough streets of Laguna Hills, California.
You catch the wrong wave on your boogie board, you'll get at least a stinger. A stinger on your knee, you'll get a raspberry.
But a lot of people, of course, especially through like the middle school and high school years, like Not Scary Farm was all the rage. I never went.
Yeah.
I wanted no part of that shit.
Not even as like a teen. That was like a prime spot to take a date and, you know, maybe do some smooching.
Nope,
or something
I went to Disneyland.
Okay. You did your smooching there.
Whatever. And then lo and behold, I meet this jackass. Like
that's right. He's talking about
in the middle of college. Yes, Ryan Bergara.
Yeah.
And who was very much obsessed with this stuff. Although we became close friends and bonded over trips to Disneyland because we are at Chapman University, which is like right down the road from Disneyland. So like in between classes and what have you, time and time again, he would like try to lure me into doing Scary Farm.
That's right.
And he would like assemble all our friends to go to do the Scary Farm. And I finally agreed to go. I think it was either junior or senior year of college.
I believe it was senior year because I think we were working on our senior thesis together.
That's
right. Byron and I also went to film school, and he was directing a film, and I was the cinematographer for it. Because back in the day, that was what I thought I was going to do for my life, which is be a cinematographer.
That's a fun fact for you.
And now I'm looking at a point and shoot camera on a tripod that's manned by nobody. And so clearly that profession went well.
It's all come full circle.
I actually technically am shooting this podcast.
Although you shouldn't sell yourself short. You actually were, I thought you were a great cinematographer.
Thank you.
And I think if you would have gone that route, you very well could have stayed that course.
We'll
but
see.
You decided
We won't,
to
actually.
make our ears bleed.
That's right.
Over here
That's
on the
right.
podcast. But the big thing that lured me into finally going was it was just an opportunity to ride some roller coasters. I love roller coasters. And I thought, you know what? If all my friends want to go to Knott's, I'll build up the guts. I'll do it so I could get on some roller coasters. I could ride Ghost Rider. And to my surprise, Ryan like helped me catch the bug in that sense. And just started getting my reps in. But I do remember like I understood that why people like it as much as they do. There is something very fun about being scared that I didn't used to think about back in the day. And then with that trip to Knott's, I also was like, oh wow, like I kind of like how these things are designed, the production value, like the scare actors going for it, like looking at it as an art form, I think really helped grow my appreciation for Knott's Scary Farm. And now like every time Halloween season rolls around, it's like the most excited I get like during that entire month is like, oh my God, spooky season's back. Knott's.
Exactly. And I guess segueing over to me now, I love all of this stuff. I live for these events. I go to every haunt that I can, but the all of it started with Knott's Scary Farm. And it's funny that you talk about why do you enjoy this? And I mean, like, I've thought about this a lot because when I think about Knott's Scary Farm, I get like this warm, nostalgic feeling that I would get the equivalent of what someone would see if like they were watching like Blue's Clues or something. You're like looking back, you're like, wow, that was a really warm time. And I think when I first stumbled upon Knott's Scary Farm, I was 10. It was 2000, I think, or 2001. There was just this, I don't know, I kind of unlocked a part of my brain. And I guess if I had to dissect it more, I have an anxiety disorder and I'm scared of everything. And I think going to a place where I'm choosing to be scared in a controlled environment, it's like I am taking that back. And I don't know. I mean, I think that just kind of made me kind of own it a little bit. I think that's probably why it grew into such an obsession. And so I was on things like ultimatehaunt.com over on the forums. Ted Doherty had made that site and he, helped put on Season of Screams, I believe. And so I was on those forums. I was myself, after going to Scary Farm and seeing the sliders, I went to I think, Home Depot, got the electric conduit that fits and ripped all the stuff out and put it on my fingers, on my gloves so that I could be a slider and put the washers on the gloves and metal on my shoes and bought the skateboard knee pads and was sliding over at my local haunt at my high school when I made mazes in my front yard out of PVC pipes. And when people would trick or treat, they would come over and like line up for a maze. I remember one year the line got so long that the police came and then I thought they were going to shut us down. Mm-hmm. And they actually came with cones to set up a line.
Oh, how fun.
And then so the police got involved in like helping us like run through this maze. And that was great until one of my friends got punched in the nose. Because we had him in a little boo box. It was great misdirection. We had this hanging body from a tree, and the body would fall, so people would like look over at the body, and then there was a box behind them, and then he would pop out of the box, and then he popped out of the box, and then he got popped. But anyways, Knott's Scary Farm was where it all started. Just the originality on display, the fact that you really felt that everybody involved went from the monsters to the maze designers to the blackouts, the people that are in the maze telling you which way to go. Everyone was just so in, and they loved it. And you could tell that, you could feel it when you would walk around. Not to say that you can't feel that at other haunts, but I feel like at Knott's, it's just so much more palpable. It just feels like a family operation, and yet it's this enormous operation. Yeah. And that's hard to capture.
I think one thing, too, that I want to follow up on what Byron said, when you were saying like you're not really interested in getting scared, but you got like soaked into the atmosphere of it. I'm pretty much the same way. Like for me, I am so, I don't want to say hardened by this, but it takes so much to scare me. But I just love,
me too.
For me, it's really just, I go in and I just get lost in what that is and just have fun with it. Right. So, even if it is so rare that anybody even like gets me with a startle, but they do, it happens, you know. But even like people hop out or something, I never want to be the guy that goes through one of these things and just stoically stares like, as you walk by, like I'll smile or like, sometimes I'll do like almost like a fake recoil, like, oh, like in Scooby-Doo or something, but it's not really meant to mock them. It's just because I'm having fun in the moment. Yeah. And really that to me, that's what all of this is. I am constantly grateful that so big of a part of my job. Obviously, I work there year round and I do all seasons, right? But such a big part of my job at Knott's is to create, I grew up playing with action figures, like Star Wars figures and all these toys, but it was always like, how do we mix them together and how to create these rules? But I get to create, for the most part, I get to create human dollhouses. And I get I get to put these people in these positions to create these worlds. Yeah. So for me, the goal is, it's not like, hey, I'm going to scare you so bad that you poop yourself or pee yourself or whatever. Like if the talent does that, awesome. Good job. Proud of you. But it's really I want you, when you walk in through the front entrance of a maze, I want you to feel like you've been transported to another world. Yeah. Right. And just give yourself that 5, 6, 7 minutes of being somewhere else and just enjoying what the story is and have all of it lend itself into one cohesive whole. Like what's the atmosphere? How do I feel like I'm here? You don't necessarily have to get scared. You just have to appreciate that you're on this crazy journey into a different world. And that's the cool thing with Knott's. Like we've got 10 mazes. We got a bunch of scare zones. You feel like you've been transported here. So even if you're not like, hey, I'm jaded. Oh, I don't want to get scared. Really, guys, it's some dudes in rubber masks that are jumping out. They're going ooga booga, right? So if you can like just remember that, like, hey, this guy, he looks terrifying, but ultimately, like, he's still got to put gas in his car and he's got to go buy apples, right? He's just another.
Always got to buy apples,
but it's just another person getting like.
Hopefully not Red Delicious, which is the worst apple by far.
I'm a Fuji guy.
Me too.
But yeah, so that's my thing is I want to create places where you can show me that immersive moment, show me that storytelling moment where you feel like you're somewhere else. And if we get everything clicking on that same thing, you feel like, hey, I got to visit this crazy place. Yeah. I got to see this crazy stuff unfold. And now I get to do it 9 more times.
It's incredible. I mean, like I think you kind of hit it at the heart of why people like theme parks at large. It's this place where you could kind of lose yourself and suspend your disbelief and lose all of your inhibitions. And it's a playground. You could kind of remember what it's like to be in a state of play that you would only be in as a kid. And I feel like haunts, and in particular Knott's, they create a place where, when you really suspend your disbelief and you're making yourself vulnerable to being scared, that is the most kid-like you could possibly be. And I just feel like a big kid every time I go to these haunts. And I look back at it fondly, and I just think Knott's, obviously it started it all, which I guess is a good segue into the history, Byron, of how this all started.
Oh, great. And that means I could circle back to that Season of Screams documentary.
Correct.
That used to play on repeat back in college.
That's I did make Byron watch that.
He buttered me up for the Halloween haunt by every time, because I was a procrastinator, and every time I wanted to get work done, Ryan would basically be like, oh, like I've got this thing for whenever I want to get work done. It's this DVD, and it's like this 3-hour, it's from 2004. It's this old Knott's Berry Farm documentary, Season of Screams, that he brought up. And so but lo and behold, like every time we put that documentary on, we would get all the work done. It was crazy. Like essays would get written, we'd prep our films. But what I didn't realize is that back then, he was just like subconsciously like, it was just the pinky at first. Yeah. And then it was the whole fist. And next thing you know, I'm at the berry bar.
The DVD to getting fisted?
You took it there.
I took it there. You're the one who started the metaphor.
I suggested it and you took it there.
I was going to say I was Miyagiing your ass. Like I was, teaching you to clean a car, but really I was teaching you how to fight. That kind of thing.
Well,
I waxed on and whacked off your ass.
It worked. So,
I didn't really wax your ass, but you know what I'm talking about.
As a tribute to that awesome documentary, I decided to write this entire history package based on that documentary by rewatching it, the entire thing last night.
Wow.
I do it every year. I rewatch it every year.
We're gonna take. Actually, there's a few quotes that were at the top of this documentary, by the way, that aren't very relevant to the history, but I got to bring them up because they're semi-relevant to this show.
Yeah.
The narrator says, today, Knott's Berry Farm boasts 160 acres of world-class rides, which is technically true because both Ghost Rider and Timber Mountain Log Ride
We're world-class.
are now certified world-class
According to this
attractions,
podcast.
according to this very official podcast. But anyways, to understand Knott's Scary Farm, it's important to understand the historic theme park that brought the world-famous event to life. In 1920...
You're going back to the start, baby.
In 1923, the Knott family, led by Walter and his wife Cordelia, and yes, I am going back to the start, Ryan, because not enough people have seen Timber Mountain Log Ride or Ghost Rider, so I'm just going to keep beating him on the head with this origin story. Walter and Cordelia Knott built a roadside stand along Beach Boulevard in Buena Park, California, where they would begin selling berries. In 1932, Walter Knott would link up with a man named Rudolph Boysen, in which he would acquire and begin selling their signature boysenberry. The Great Depression led to a massive price drop for land, in which the Knotts family took the major risk of buying more. In 1934, Cordelia would make a game-changing decision and begin serving fried chicken dinners in her tea room. The fried chicken dinner became so popular that people began lining up by the hundreds to get it. It wouldn't take long before the Knotts began installing gift shops and attractions to help entertain the guests while waiting to be seated. The plot of land behind the expanding tea room would transform into Ghost Town, an old Western-themed area with real artifacts brought in from Arizona. The 1960s would welcome two classic Knott's Berry Farm rides helmed by Bud Hurlbut, who we mentioned in the Timber Mountain Log Ride episode, being the Calico Mine Ride and the aforementioned Timber Mountain Log Ride. And although roller coasters would eventually make their way into the park in the 1970s, something even more monumental, that's coming from me by the way, would begin to take place during this pivotal decade of Knott's history.
Now that was actually a pretty good bulleted point way to get to where we are now.
Yeah, we're getting there.
The house built by the mouse, the place Mary by the Berry.
That's right.
That's what I say. I don't think that's actually official. Do you guys say that? Knott's Berry Farm was the place made Mary by the Berry?
You don't want to know what we say. No one has ever said that.
You should put that on a t-shirt. Because Disney has the house built by the mouse, but I think place made Mary by the Berry is pretty good.
It is not bad.
I think it's pretty good.
Back to the 1960s, what could possibly be more monumental to theme parks than roller coasters? Well, in 1972, Bill Hollingshead, who was the park's head of entertainment at the time, received a call from a man named Gary Blair, who was the manager of a man named Larry Vincent, who played a man named Seymour on a campy local horror TV program in Los Angeles. Mr. Blair pitched an idea to Hollingshead in which Seymour would host a live Halloween event at Knott's Berry Farm and be held inside what was then called the John Wayne Theater. The only problem was that this pitch was made in September, which didn't provide Hollingshead the time he wanted to execute this potential event at the scale he wanted, which would stretch beyond the confines of the theater and out into Ghost Town for a grandiose Halloween party. In addition to the time constraint that eliminated any chances of a 1972 event, the Knott family would also go on to vote against the idea. But, luckily for all of us fright lovers, one man would override the family ruling. That man happened to be, perhaps, the only one that literally could, Walter Knott himself.
Now, I've always wondered, is that accurate? Do you know if that, because that story came from that documentary, it was told by a guy named Gene Witham, who was one of the original people who made The Haunt. Is that something that you guys circulate as well? That not Walter was the guy being like, nah, we're going to have a party.
I mean, I can't say for sure because I was a baby and I was not in attendance. And, it seems plausible to me.
He brings it up in the documentary. He brings it up in vivid detail. And he says that Walt's walking with this, I guess the guy that got word of the vote, through Ghost Town, and he brings it up to Walter Knott. He sits on that bench in between those
statues,
between those two figures, and he looks around and he a movie scene. He says
that Walt said, quote, "I want a party."
Yeah,
and I want it to be here.
And don't we all want a party?
That's my vote. I'm sticking with it. That's all I have to say on the matter.
That is actually pretty much verbatim.
I'm pretty sure that's the exact quote. You could play the quote from the documentary.
That's my vote. That's all I have to say on the matter.
You're a psycho. Anyways.
Gene Witham will always respect the man for that.
This put the park's entertainment team back on track with hopes of debuting the event in 1973, in which Martha Boyd, who worked in marketing at the park, suggested the name Halloween Haunt. So, in October of 1973, Ghost Town would take a different shape, transforming into a nightmarishly fun and thrilling spectacle. Out of seemingly nowhere, Knott Scary Farm's first Halloween Haunt had arrived, becoming the very first event of its kind. It is important to note that this debuted as a 3-night event, which proved to be so popular that guests were turned away at ticket booths due to reaching maximum capacity. Knott's clearly had an instant hit on their hands, and year after year would continue to add additional features and attractions. Examples of this include their inaugural maze entitled 10 Chilling Chambers in 1977, which Gus brought up, that they did a redo of.
Last year we, alongside John Cook and Ted Doherty, we designed a tribute to 50 years of haunt history, and the new maze was called the Chilling Chambers in deference to.
What does Ted do over at Knott's now? Because Ted created a fan site called ultimatehaunt.com, which was my home, and I would be on the forums. That's how I learned how to be a slider. I got all the gear from that forum, but now he's actually at Knott's.
Well, no, he's not technically an employee of Knott's.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's we contract him to do things. He was contracted to work with John on with us on a couple of mazes for the 50th, and he does marketing does reach out to him occasionally for haunt informational tours and things like that. He's a friend of the farm for sure.
For sure.
He is not an hourly employee of the park.
Is John Cook, is he involved in this year's event, or is he over at Queen Mary? Because he used to do Queen Mary.
I'm not sure what John is up to this year. He doesn't have any hand in any of our new stuff.
Okay.
But of course, his legacy lives on with the Legacy Store. And obviously the work he did with Daniel and I on Cinema Slasher and Chilling Chambers.
Now, is your official title maze designer, or is it?
I believe my official title is creative designer.
Okay, cool.
So I just or maybe it depends what paperwork you look at. Sometimes it's scenic designer, but that's not really.
Which one do you prefer?
I prefer creative designer because scenic designer is really just designing what someone else comes up with. But creative designer, we create, like, literally the new maze this year is all out of my crazy head. So
amazing.
But in addition to 10 Chilling Chambers in 1977, they'd also introduced scare zones, spookified ride enhancements, and let's not forget the various seasonal show offerings such as Elvira, Ed Alonzo, and of course the hanging in Calico Square, which evolved from a basic witch hanging to the pop culture infused laugh machine many of you are familiar with today. And over 50 years after the inaugural Halloween haunt, Knott Scary Farm is running better than ever, thanks to people like Gus, and continues to stay faithful to its original spirit while upholding its world-renowned reputation for innovating new ways to frighten those brave enough to experience what is undoubtedly the theme park industry's most historic Halloween offering.
I would agree with that. I mean, like, from a actual textbook, it is technically the most historic Halloween offering in the world, I would say. I don't think anything could really rival the history that it's already put down on paper.
Yeah, no, I feel like Knott started this tradition of just this, and the way it has grown. Everything out there that you see is just, they owe themselves to what, Walter and his original team created.
The Granddaddy Haunt.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go into some fun facts. And these are fun facts, Gus. So, I got these from the internet. Actually, honestly, I'm going to just say this right now. A lot of these bullet points I just wrote off the top of my head because I'm a psycho and I know a lot of these things.
It sounds fun to me.
And if any of them are like, that's not correct, just let me know.
Are we going to be rating the actual amount of fun?
No, you could do that if
in
you
each
like.
Of these facts. Like if one of them comes at me and it's not fun, I'm just going to say, Ryan.
Not fun.
Just what are you doing?
That's not a fun. What's the opposite of a fun fact? A flat fact. Let's move on. Let's go to the first fun fact. And this one is actually not even that fun, but it is informative.
You're really selling it.
Yeah. The event features over 1,000 monsters with countless other folks behind the scenes, such as Gus and other creative designers, makeup effects artists, security, blackouts, many more to put on this event every year. It's like a giant team sport, if you will. And we're thankful for it. The event is referred to as Knott Scary Farm, but was originally called Knott's Halloween Haunt, which, as Byron mentioned, was coined by Martha Boyd. Absolutely badass. It's the name I prefer to call it. I like calling it the Haunt.
It's so funny because I think there was maybe 5-6 years ago, they decided, hey, we're just going to go all in on Scary Farm. Because when I started, it was it was Halloween Haunt, right?
Yes.
And it was not Scary Farm Halloween Haunt. It was a big mouthful. But on our end, the people putting it on, it was always just haunt. Like, hey, we do this haunt thing. And what we found is when we talked to, they would do their surveys or we would talk to people outside. For them, it was always, hey, we go to Not Scary Farm.
Yeah.
And so it was just this weird thing of like everyone but us was kind of referring to it as Not Scary Farm.
It makes sense.
And so it just, Not Scary Farm, Not Scary Farm, Not Scary Farm. It's just, I think for just what that is, it kind of just stuck to the, hey, well, okay, well, let's dive all in on Scary Farm.
I'll be honest, I didn't know it was even called Halloween Haunt.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I went because all I heard was Not Scary Farm.
From
So I
a
was like,
marketing
I guess
perspective,
I assume they changed the name. Like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, Not Scary Farm is so iconic. Why would they change the name?
No, it was yeah. For the longest time too, and even if you look at the really old logos, you just see it is Not Scary Farm real small, and then it's just Halloween Haunt as this massive thing. But I think anybody can say, hey, we've got a Halloween Haunt, but there's only one Not Scary Farm. And I do believe some of our sister parks have done Haunt or Halloween Haunt or some derivative of that.
Moving on, it is the first Halloween event ever put on by a theme park, and therefore the longest running Halloween event at a theme park. Absolutely insane. The first event in 1973 only ran 3 nights with no mazes, but monsters were in the Calico Mine Ride, the Timber Mountain Log Ride, and the no longer with us Haunted Shack. It's now defunct. I wish it wasn't, though, because I do remember that quite fondly.
The Haunted Shack was pretty cool.
You could sit in that chair where it looked like you were like on the wall.
Yeah.
It's cool. The event sold out before it even began. As Byron mentioned, they had to turn people away from the ticket booth. Everything that first year was ragtag, with the brain trust of Martha Boyd, Bill Hollingshead, and Gary Salisbury being a scrappy brain trust that brought the event to life with what was available. The stunt performers were used as monsters. The stunt performers from like the Ghost Town stunt shows, they were used as monsters. The Knott's theater manager, Sandy Parker, helped coordinate with her costumers, makeup artists, and set designers, doing what they could to decorate the entire 160-acre park, or for the most part, just Ghost Town. And they would do that with cobwebs and old army netting, which have now, to this day, it seems like they've remained the same, and they're pretty iconic. The look of the Not Scary Farm cobwebs.
Yeah, it's very much, it's a staple of Ghost Town. It really is. Maybe they're not always the most realistic, but it's just the vibe.
It's more fun.
Yeah, it is. It is just fun. And it's funny, even back in those days, that was one of the things that they did that the employees themselves would decorate their own little areas.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like employees would be like, oh, what am I going to do for Halloween? And they would, before it got to be as big as it was, individual employees, they would do their own costumes. They would just come dressed as a monster or whatever and decorate their, if you were working at the shop, they'd put up some Halloween decor that they had.
Even walking around the Knott's, corporate office, if you want to call it, in the backstage area of the park, when I was walking through, people had decorated their cubicles, which I thought was pretty fun.
Some of us never take that down.
I wouldn't either. During that first run in 1973, 8 to 9 classic monsters, like your Draculas, your Wolfmans, your Frankensteins, Frankie, they did roam Ghost Town to entertain guests, taking pictures and whatnot. Technically, that was the first ever scare zone. However, in the documentary Season of Screams, which we've mentioned about 1 billion times now, former monster Bob Vernon tells the story of him working the event for the first time in 1977.
Yes.
And how that actually was perhaps the creation of scare zones. As he tells it, Bob says that Knott's had these things, which they're still there in Ghost Town. They're called peek-ins, being that you could peek into this little kind of still life kind of thing. And they had a Chinese laundry shop. They had a blacksmith shop, things like that. Back in the day, they would put monsters in the peek-ins. So when people would look into them, they would pop out and scare the shit out of people. And Bob Vernon was one of these people that was in a peek-in. However, the night he was supposed to go and be in the peek-in, the door was locked. And so he couldn't get in. And while he was waiting for them to go get a key, they told him, hey, why don't you just kind of roam around and scare people? And so he did. And he said, quote, and I just remember getting super into the role, and I was just walking around there like a madman. And long story short, Gary Salisbury and people from entertainment were watching him do this and laughing their asses off at him just scaring the shit out of people. And the next night, all the monsters were let out of their peek-ins. And that technically, I guess, would create scare zones as we know it now.
Which is so crazy to think about that, they could just like a switch, just be like, you know what? All the scare actors the next night go. I feel like the amount of hurdles at other parks or other come to get anything done to that scale, within one night, okay, change of plans. Let's just unleash everyone. The approval process, I feel like nowadays would be like so rigorous.
Well, that's, I think, what makes Haunt so cool is that there is this feeling of, like I said, it being a family-run operation, and with that comes a certain amount of nimbleness, being able to make decisions quickly. Because, like, you're right. If that was like even at like I don't know, maybe even today, it would be tough to maybe like outright just be like, you know what, all monsters are going into this area now. I feel like that would be tough. But back in the day when it was a scrappy operation, we're thankful for little tweaks like that, because who knows what would have happened.
Yeah. I mean, there's a level of flexibility that we have, but something like that, gosh, on the scale of what we have now, it would be wild.
It'd be tough.
Yeah, it'd be real tough.
Yeah, 1,000 monsters.
Yeah.
Moving 1,000 people anywhere is tough. Speaking of Bob Vernon, he might have one of my favorite quotes I've ever seen in a documentary. And this isn't really a fun fact. I just have to say this quote out loud because it really makes me laugh my ass off. And it's something that I quote to my brother and my friend Roland, who was my roommate, who, like Byron, I tortured with this documentary. But we do quote this all the time. And it's this moment when Bob Vernon, he was in Haunt from 1977 to 1979. And he came back to the event later and experienced sliding for the first time. And so he describes walking through the park and this slider sliding down a bunch of slats, like one of those ramps in Ghost Town, and getting scared. And his reaction, I think, is something like, yeah, we were walking around and this guy came down a bunch of slats. And at first I was like, whoa. And then I was like, cool.
This guy comes flying down, hits his knees, and hits each of those slaps all the way down. And I mean, it was so effective. Both of us, oh. And then the second reaction was, cool.
So me and my brother and Roland always say that quote. We're like, and then we were like, cool. And he puts up 2 thumbs up. Shout out Bob Vernon. Love that guy. If you're out there, Bob, I want to talk to you. Give me a call.
He's out there daydreaming about his double pass out.
His double pass out. Never scared somebody so much that he got a double pass out.
I love how he just like casually like I've had people pass out before, but never gotten a double.
2 people. I never scared 2 people at the same time where there was a double pass out. And he describes the person falling over like an ironing board, laying out spread eagle.
And that was from those peak holes.
The Pekins.
You're the Pekins.
Yeah. I think the story was, he said there was a mom who was like getting away from all the scare actors, was like, oh, look, here's a statue of this guy. And here, I'll lift you up to the bars of this Pekin so you could get a better look. And then he just grabbed the bars.
and then they both fell on their back.
And they both passed out. Double pass out.
Double pass out.
The classic double pass out.
That's got to be a drinking phrase, by the way.
Double pass out? Yeah. I'm sure many bartenders are like, I see a double pass out every night.
Yeah, it's nothing new.
As I understand it, there is a hierarchy when it comes to being a monster, and it's based around your years spent working the event. If you are lucky enough to be chosen as a monster after you audition, you start in a maze, and then eventually over time you go work your way up to being a street monster. Is that correct, Gus? Is that still how it is?
No, actually, there are plenty of monsters that have, such a successful audition that we start them on the streets now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So,
I'm something of a street monster myself. I actually did one night. Knott was nice enough to let me come down and put me in all the makeup and get the prosthetics put on, and then go out there and be a madman. I think they thought, oh, here's this fucking guy from YouTube who like thinks it'd be funny to be a monster. He doesn't know what it's actually like. And they didn't know that I'd been like training my whole life for this moment. I was like in the car on the way down on the 5. I was like pounding my steering wheel going like, this is what we play for.
He'd been practicing it on us for like years at that point.
That's true. I did scare my roommates, but I also was a slider at my local haunt. So like when they put me in the makeup and they actually had like a handler, which was Miranda, who is now actually I think she's over at Universal, but she was at Knott's forever. Shout out to Miranda Dill. And she was the one tasked with being my handler in case anything went wrong and she would keep her distance like 30, 40 yards away and just watch me. And after a while, she was like, I can't because I was like running around Ghost Town and I met this guy named Trey who's Scattered Scabs over on Instagram. And I believe he's a slider. And he actually thought I was one of the scare actors and he thought I was some new guy. And then when he found out it was me, because he was actually a fan of Ghost Files, he gave me the mark of approval of being like, I thought you were like one of us. And that was like the greatest thing ever said to me in my life. The greatest accomplishment of my life was Trey telling me that. But it's a blast. I don't think I could do that every night though. That my body would fall apart.
It's not an easy gig.
No, I mean, I'm sure you like probably had to do workout regimens around the clock. They say that in the documentary of how in shape you have to stay to just handle the wear and tear of a nightly, for the most part, event.
I didn't really.
Shit.
Well, no, but because I came from like you know, like I was a metal kid living in pits. And
Okay.
I played a ton of roller hockey. So I was used to just running around and getting banged up.
You were born in the pit,
Hey, you know.
molded by it.
But yikes. But no, so for me, it wasn't really that that big of a deal, but I also was kind of athletic going into it.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
wasn't, I could see, you know, I see people that are like, oh my God, I'm ready to die. Like if I did it, if I tried to do a full season now, I would just be like, RIP, just do my will.
Would you though not jump at the chance for them to be like, Gus, you want to do one night?
I have done like a couple of years ago. I have done here and there. I've done
That's
a little
awesome.
bit. You know, it is fun. But being so far removed from it, it's great to be in this role of, I love creating it and starting it and watching everybody have a blast.
Yeah.
And in the times I have jumped in, it's been great, but it's also been great knowing at any time I can go, yep, that's that. And I'm just like, this was a blast. So happy to have done this.
You don't ever have like the itch to be like, if you design like, you know, one of your mazes like Grimoire or like Dark Entities and you've never had the itch to be like, I know exactly the timing of this scare that I designed, so I want to spend a night doing it.
I actually did some time in Dark Entities over
That
a
makes
couple
sense.
of years. So
I wouldn't be able to resist.
The Dark Entities was a lot of fun. You know, wow, I haven't even put any thought into that aspect of it at all this year. I've just been so busy trying to make it happen.
Maybe in year 2 though, you'll jump in, right?
You never know if they let me.
How just really quickly as a quick question, what typically is the lifespan of a maze? In terms of like years, like are you guys judging it off of guest reaction, or is it like, you know, every maze gets like 3 to 4? It seems like from the outside, it's like, oh, we have like 3 to 4 is like a good run.
Yeah, 3 to 4 is pretty much a good run. Really, it depends on, you know, what. There's a lot of, you know, business decisions that go into it. Obviously, there's certain mazes that are backstage mazes. They're built in a more permanent fashion that they don't have to deal with the wear and tear of
like Paranormal Inc. or the depths or stuff like that.
Yeah, like the backstage mazes get to last longer, so there's more durability to the build of it. But generally, you try to go in for the most part, there's cycles, right? There's cycles of, you just look at, hey, well, what's the oldest ones now? But there's more to it than just that. Sometimes you have to take into account the popularity of the maze, right? Because we had, you know, the Asylum lasted a long time. Allure the Vampire lasted a long time.
Classic maze.
And you know, our latest one, Trick or Treat, that lasted a long time. And then when it was time for maybe it to not necessarily go out to pasture, but instead of going away, it got a bit of a facelift. So really, there is longevity. There's just like, how is this thing holding up? It's usually time-based, just in what are the oldest ones when, you know, it's like Midsummer, right? You're just like, well, the old ones get pushed over the cliff.
Yep.
But
so you tell them, how many people have you pushed over a cliff at this point?
No comment.
Okay. Trick or Treat. Were you involved in that maze?
Trick or Treat. I actually was involved the first year I was doing props for it. So we decorated the first year. I was never involved in the design side, but one of the fun things that I did get to do was I was in charge of the props team at the time, and we had the trickster masks. Yeah. I sculpted the vamp trickster mask. Oh, amazing! So that was kind of neat. But then I never got one of it. I was like, one of these days I got to go get one.
I loved the addition of Trick or Treat. Was a maze basically of like a classic. You would actually go up, you would ring the doorbell, they'd let you in. It was a story around the witch, I believe. Yep. And one year, as you said, it was there for a while, and they spruced it up by adding, or maybe I have this backwards. I think they spruced it up by adding the flashlights.
Yes.
So they had these flashlights that they would hand everybody, which must have been an endeavor from a props standpoint. But these flashlights, they would turn on and off on command. Based on where you were in the maze, it felt like, to time to scares, and the scare actors would be able to hide in the dark spots, and when this flashlight would turn on, it'd scare the shit out of you.
Yeah, that was around the time we were we're just trying to, you know, we're trying to embrace new tech, right? Yeah. And we had these cool new lights that were, you know, you had the transmitters in it, so they were able to trigger effects and things like that. So so that was actually John Cook headed up that to go to Trick or Treat Lights Out. And that was really fun. It was a cool...
one of my favorite mazes of all time.
It was a cool way to keep Trick or Treat going, you know, when it had reached sort of the end of what even then it was an extended life cycle.
Do you think you'll bring back anything like that, like the flashlight effect? Because I thought that was so effective. I know it probably was a pain in the ass, but... Well,
we're always looking at what's the next thing, right? And right now that's our lanterns, you know, or sort of like the interactive lanterns.
Wait, where is it? What is it? What could you... Okay, we'll get to that. Okay, we're going to get to that. We're going to put a pin in that.
Trick or Treat active in 2012?
I don't think so.
I don't know why. Like, one of my earliest memories of going into a maze was the Trick or Treat maze. It was the one under Ghost Rider, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's where Waxworks is now. Did you do Waxworks, by the way?
No, Daniel did Waxworks.
It's the last year, this year, right?
It sure is, yeah.
Being a slider, though, when we're back to talking about the monster hierarchy, is a whole different kind of process. You actually have to get a slider certification because it can be dangerous if you are just sliding out in the dark and you don't know what you're doing. It can be dangerous for a novice, but if you've practiced and gotten the certification, it's totally fine. I've never seen anybody get injured. I'm sure the list is pretty of people who have is pretty low. But if you don't know, sliding is a scare tactic in which a monster slides along the ground on his knees while wearing skateboard knee pads and metal attachments on gloves and shoes to both protect their feet and hands, but also to create sparks and a nasty sound that startles guests as the slider whizzes by their feet. Sliding was actually invented at Knott's Scary Farm. It first started with basically diving at people's feet, almost like a baseball slide. And then monsters at that time used volleyball pads and like cheesecloth around the pads to protect themselves. But nowadays, it's advanced to this knee pad sliding. And that was started by Todd Stubler, who was a monster in Camp Snoopy. And he is, I guess, like the grandfather of sliding as we know it today. Created sliding as we know it today, and now you could see it at haunt events all around the world.
Yeah, it's a really, I mean, it's a great thing to have in in your arsenal of scares, right? Yeah. And now, gosh, there's so many groups that are doing it. They've created like sliding clubs, and in a way, it makes it, because these guys commit themselves so much to it, and guys and gals, and they all commit themselves so much to it so strongly that when it comes to certification, I'm not personally involved in certification, but there are tests. Basically, you got to go through these cones. You got to show that you're aware. You got to show that you can go into a slide and come out of it still in character, and also that like you can stop when you need to stop. So basically, you have to show your accuracy as a slider. But wow, now people are so well versed in doing that so much that they do it as a hobby. A lot of these people do it year round. Yeah. So that when so many of them come for that certification, it's just a no brainer for them.
We could probably show some clips right now while we're talking of like some of the sliding they show some really cool ones in Season of Screams. I remember one where a guy slides and he lands under like a popcorn cart essentially.
And they're like essentially doing this all out on like a roller rink.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Well, most of the practices, they do.
They used to do like a slider jumping competition where you would like see how many people you could jump over. They don't do that anymore, right?
There is a slideshow that's happening in the Gauntlet Scare Zone now. There is a new one that happens nightly.
Do you know what time that happens at?
I don't know this
year.
I'm
going to look that up.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Gauntlet was the first non-ghost town scare zone.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. So for the 50th anniversary last year, the Gauntlet came back to Camp Snoopy.
Yeah, it's here this year, which
sure
is awesome. As you can tell, and also there is a actual documentary only about sliding. It's called Sliders of Ghost Town. That's actually available on YouTube. You could go check that out if you want to see. They track down the people who originally created sliding and brought it to what it is today. And it's a fun watch.
It's fun hearing them like vouch for it being like some sort of Olympic sport or something.
It should be. If breakdancing is like, Olympic
that's
sport.
That's what I'm saying.
We need to get a ray gun.
I think it's all fair game now, yeah.
We need a ray gun to be a slider.
Oh, boy.
She basically was. Knott's takes the art of scaring very seriously, as you could tell. Do they still have scare school? They used to have scare school. Oh, they do? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, talent goes through a lot. Their orientations are actually, I'm going to be at my new Mazes orientation tonight. So I'll be speaking to some of the guys tonight. And then every maze, every performer, every zone, they have their allotted time where they go and they learn the ropes of the zone. For the mazes I'm overseeing, I will be there to speak to them about, the story of the thing, what their characters are in that space.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Timing and stuff like that as well, too.
Yeah, it's just a matter of there's a lot now. The world has changed so much in the last 20 years. So there's a lot more emphasis on like personal safety and like, how do you react to this and what do you do with this? So,
gotcha.
But, we still get some time in there to work with them on what we want them to. I want when a talent comes to work in my maze, one of these performers comes to be a monster in my maze, I want them to find a way to be themselves, inhabit this, but also live in this space, feel this space, and have respect for the space and know what their place is here. So it's not just I'm in this and my whole job is to go ooga booga.
That's right.
The guy goes, why? I want you to know, like, okay, so when there's nobody around or when you're tired, what is your non-scare role in this room? Like, is this, not that this is what, but like, is this a big pinochle table, right? Are you sitting there doing this and glaring at people? That's next year, the pinochle maze, right?
I can't wait for the pinochle table.
Yeah. But, it's just, we do have a little bit of that opportunity to get people to know and understand, because going back to the previous point, it's like, how do we create an immersive world? And scare school is an important part of that.
No, I think if I am ever allowed back in the farm to be a scare actor, I'm going to make a point out of making my scare noise instead of like the typical, like the little growl. I'm actually going to say ooga booga. And if you could get someone scared by saying ooga booga, I think that's pretty good.
I could do it.
Classic Ooga Booga. Oh, that guy's trained by Gus. He said Ooga Booga.
I will say I'm a big fan of the snarl.
The snarl
It's
is
always like right by your ear when it passes by too.
I
You not a
have
snarler?
I have so many mixed feelings on the snarl, because if you're just a random dude and like my character, I'm a creepy nurse, right?
yeah, the
And
snarl.
then you snarl, you're like, I don't get it. If you're a werewolf, oh my gosh, snarl away. Like
I'm
I'm a
thinking
pig
about those
monster.
like dudes with like the beaks. Usually,
Yeah, like make
A
it
ghost
make
town
sense,
character,
right?
yeah,
Make
yeah.
it make sense. There's like,
Like I'm used to it now, so I guess it's not like scary
It's weird to
anymore.
me.
Like originally, I used to like they used to catch me off guard.
Me personally, I'm a snarl guy.
no snarl. There you go. Yeah.
But
I was never a snarl guy. It's not my thing.
no, he's an Ooga Booga
I'm
straight.
absolutely 100% Ooga Booga. If you, oh my gosh, thankfully there's no video of me like demonstrating to like as I'm art directing the maze, like going through and it's like, okay, and this is the Ooga spot where I got to go. Ooh,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I act it all out in the most ridiculous ways, and
As you should.
you know, just bless the craft leads in these venues for having to deal with me, but still creating something so awesome.
But you could feel the passion of like the seriousness in which the monsters take it, and like you could feel that at this
You
event.
could definitely feel the Ooga Booga.
It's big Ooga Booga power. The event features 160 acres of scare zones, mazes, and Halloween-themed attractions. According to the OC Register, there's approximately 75 fog machines that span this park to cover it in fog, specifically Ghost Town, Camp Snoopy, and the mazes. I'm going to just keep going on. Glycol, aka the liquid used in fog machines, or when I call it, the juice. According to the OC Register, Knott's goes through about 1,800 gallons of the juice per year. That seems about accurate, right?
I don't know.
You measuring the juice?
I just, I had to do it one shot at a time.
Fog Alley is what haunt heads call Main Street in Ghost Town. It's a street that is absolutely engulfed in fog during Halloween haunt. Fucking rules. It's amazing. And the machines there are said to be able to hold 2.5 gallons each of the juice. The event started with Larry Seymour, but eventually starred people like Wolfman Jack, Weird Al Yankovic in 1981, and Elvira in 1982. I actually did not know Weird Al was part of the event at one point.
Yeah, man. That's awesome.
Weird. And then I'm going to end off this fun fact section with some just tips. I get asked a lot because people know I'm a psychopath of like, how do you conquer the park? My advice is rope drop. Get there before park opening. And if you could afford it, the Fright and Fast Lane is a good way to see all the mazes and possibly the rides as well if you're into that. Or what I used to do back in the day is I would do the pre-scare buffet, or I believe now it's just called the Scary Farm Buffet Dinner. You get a great buffet. You get to interact with the the monsters while you're eating, and then you get let into the park 30 minutes early.
Yeah, that's really the best way to just, if you're there and you're trying to pack it all in one night, I cannot say enough good things about doing that buffet early.
Yeah.
And especially this year because the buffet gets you access to our backstage mazes.
That's correct.
And this year, both of our new mazes are in that area. So you'll be able to get to them early before the lines get too crazy later in the night.
Is there not 3 mazes back there in that backstage
There
area?
are actually 4 mazes back in that.
Yeah,
backstage area.
because it includes the Ghost Rider maze, right?
Yeah, this year we'll have Waxworks. We're going to have Widows, our new maze. And then we have the Bloodline.
Yes.
And we have Eight Fingers 9, the other new maze.
So both the new mazes are in the backstage. So if you want to see those mazes, this is how I would get through the mazes. You get that buffet dinner, you get let in 30 minutes early, you head back to the backstage area, knock them all out, and now you really only have 6 mazes left to get through the night. And if you're swiftly moving, as I would be, you would get through all of them. And that's like one of the main tips. You could also monitor wait times by checking online on Thrill Data or consulting trip reports on forums like Mice Chat, USH Forums, Reddit. You could plan a route and stick to that route. But like we said, in general, I usually will start at the backstage area so I can knock out 4 mazes because those get packed as the night goes on. And they're honestly the most, like, I would say, built out mazes because, as Gus alluded to earlier, they're more permanent in that they are in a soundstage. And those are usually the ones that have a longer lifespan anyway.
Avoid the siren song of Ghost Rider when you're walking by it, unless it looks like a walk-on.
You can get stuck in there.
I think, if you're dead set on making Ghost Rider part of your night and you're able to get that pre-scare,
I think
just hop right on in there.
Or what I would do is I would do it at the very, very end of the night when it's basically closing. Because
there's still some nights there's a long line.
Really?
Yeah, and you can get in line up until park opens, but you can be like, they don't say, hey, it stopped. So if you get in there late, you can wait it out.
Yeah, I mean, you could just hop on right away if you want to knock it out.
I don't think it'll be dark yet. That's the only problem.
And that's what you want with a Ghost Rider nighttime ride over at Not Scary Farm. You get to see the fog rolling around through the streets when you're going up that lift hill. It's magical.
But Gus is right. There is like there's a very brief period.
Yeah, there's that one
right upon opening that you can basically get a walk on. If not, it's
a tough one.
It's going to be a 3-hour wait like all night.
Yeah, personally, I'm not the kind of guy that'll go to an amusement park for a Halloween event and go on the rides. Like, but I understand.
Me
But
too.
that's also big for. I do understand though. That's a big, for people who have a season pass and they come a bunch of times, or people who are like, I've had my fill of getting scared. I'm going to have some fun. So
Yeah.
I see it, but it's not for me.
This is advice for haunt heads who really just want to see all the mazes. And I if you can't do the pre-scare buffet or the Scary Farm buffet, eat dinner before. Plan on snacking later in the night once the lines are already long, because that will slow you down. If you try to eat dinner in like prime time, you are losing prime maze viewing time, and it every minute counts. I don't ride the rides until the very end after all the mazes are complete, and this is actually maybe the biggest part here. And you're gonna sound crazy by doing this. Make sure that if you're going with a group of non-sickos, that you tell them, hey, I'm going to Not Scary Farm. Here's my plan, and I'm going to stick to this plan. And if you don't like this plan, that's fine. Just don't come with me, because I'm not going to be able to see all the mazes unless I do it in this way. Because a lot of times you'll go with a group of friends and they'll be like, let's get on Supreme Scream or something right now. Or like, I want to get on Hang Time. Great rides. I get it. But you could do those any time of the year, and you're gonna lose out on a maze because of that, which you could only see this night. So you want to have that conversation with them before the event, and not in the heat of the moment when it gets awkward.
Such a big challenge when you've got it's good to have a couple of running buddies with you that you are on the same page. Like, you go do the things, but when you have that big group, that doesn't always happen. But luckily now everybody has cell phones, so you're able to just say, hey, we're going to do what we're going to do. We'll see you at X spot at 10
exactly.
o'clock. Right?
But then you get into that whole thing of just then they're like, oh, wait, I'm meeting up with you over here. And then timing with someone, maybe they're on a ride and you're texting them where are you at? And they can't see their phone. That's why I used to send out an email before the event and it'd be like, here's my itinerary in print with time code of what we're going to be doing. If you don't want this and you plan on deviating from this, I will leave you behind. And I would send that email to my parents. And I would just walk around. Byron can attest to this, with a group of 10 people that would just literally be following me like a tour guide. And they knew that if they followed me, you're going to get on every maze. You're going to be exhausted because I'm going to be walking like a madman. But it's what you got to do.
I don't know. It's less exhausting than waiting in lines.
That is true.
Yeah.
And I don't know why this came to mind, but because we're so local. But do people travel from far areas to come to Scary Farm? Because I'm in that case,
there are fans that that were OC residents and they transplanted somewhere else, but we do have people coming from out of town. Sure.
People fly in, because I think it'd be super fun to approach this one year as a tourist, where you come and you do the day ticket, and that's when you do your rides and stuff. It's not the Radisson anymore.
You'd be exhausted.
They have that. Well, because you have the hotel. If you're traveling, it's
the newly renovated Knott's.
The Knott's Hotel is what it's called.
And imagine just being able to rest there during the day, do your whole haunt, and then not have to drive home or anything like that after. Oh man.
That does it for the fun facts, but let's move on to really quickly to our new section, Armchair Engineering. What's one thing you would do to possibly make this attraction, or in this case, this event, even better? And I have a couple suggestions here, and we're going to run through them really quickly. And I'm curious to say, I'm going to say them to Gus's face.
How dare you?
I bring back scare actors in the log ride and the mine ride. I know that it's tough for talent and logistically it presents problems, but those always were so effective, and it makes me want to get on those and add them to my lineup of things I need to see.
It's really more a matter of state guidelines as far as the ability of ride envelopes.
Oh,
it's just that people are not able to get within a certain perimeter of the ride while it's in motion. That makes so much sense. So that is the challenge for that.
How do they get around that at Haunted Hayride?
I can't speak to what happens at other venues, but I know that with ours, we have to keep a safe perimeter around the ride. So that's the challenge. If you can't perform, that was the thing. It was Wild Wild West in the day. People would run up and they'd be banging on a log. It is just not something that is either safe or advisable in any way, shape,
That's why this section is titled Armchair Engineering.
Yes.
I'd also bring back a version of Infected that covers a majority of Camp Snoopy. I loved when that was almost like an RPG game. I remember when one of the things you would do is you would go to this campsite and have to look for this key, and one of the monsters popped out of the tent and almost gave my mom a heart attack. One of my most fond memories. I would bring that back because I love that. It's probably that takes up so much space though.
Well, that's the challenge, right? If you have something that, let's say, you know, Infected was awesome over at Camp Snoopy, but really like you affected the entire flow and ecosystem of all of Not Scary Farm,
It makes
right?
sense,
Because
yeah.
you couldn't walk through it. And also like, hey, well, not so much anymore, but chilling chambers, how does that exist
Without that space,
because you're in, you know, back then we had mazes at the balloon race and things like that. How does that, there's always the trade-off, right?
Yeah.
This was an amazing experience, but there were pros and cons to it. I loved it there. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it was also a lot of fun in its second life in the Mystery Lodge.
In the maze. And also, just for you guys who don't know what I'm talking about, Infected was a maze in which you would actually have a gun, like laser tag, and you would shoot zombies as they popped out at you. And it's in its original form, it was in Camp Snoopy, where that entire area, and you would run from place to place. They had I forget what the eatery is called that has like the waterfall near it in Camp Snoopy, but that was like set up as like a makeshift hospital, and people would be under like sheets on beds, and you would have to walk through. It felt like you were in an episode of The Walking Dead, which was incredible. My other pitch would be, what if you just redid Berry Tales and had monsters pop out there and you shoot the monsters? It becomes a shooter.
Bring back the Not Scary Tales.
No, yeah, that's right. Not Scary Tales. This is great because Gus is now hearing the things that people say online and being able to be like, here's why we can't do that.
And that's, you know, that's another funny part because my whole career doing this, it's just like, hey, you know what you should do? You should do it. No one ever wants to hear, well, the reality is I'm like, oh, I'm going to tune you out now.
I do want to hear that.
Yeah,
reality.
but it's funny. Well, thank you for that. But yeah, there's always like, my gosh, you don't understand. We talk about all this stuff and this is stuff we'd love to do, but there's always the big but.
There is always a but.
You know, there's always a but.
And it's always a big one. And my last thing I have here, and this actually, I think you could do this. This is me saying to a creative designer at Knott, here's what you should do. I've always thought that the Carnival scare zone was too bright. Like, I feel like if instead of making it like a boardwalk, lean into it being kind of like an abandoned theme park kind of aesthetic. Because I've always wanted to go to an abandoned theme park, and then there's just these clowns roaming around. What do you think about that?
No comment. No, these are ideas that obviously we've kicked around and done things with. And yeah, I think that, you know, if there's a possibility that sometime over there we can get that to be, you know, it's such a perfect fit. I can't imagine that going away, but there's always like, hey, what do we do in the future? This year, actually, there's a little bit of a color palette change with Carnival. There's some new talent coming out there that there's been a shift in how they're wardrobed out there. And last year we did get some cool new stuff out there, some new decor out there. So, you know, hopefully there's a future where that gets expanded on, and you never know what could happen.
And then my last thing is, how if this all ends for me, could I count on you to have me as a creative designer of Red Knots?
I'm not in charge of hiring.
That's a good question. That's a good answer. That's a really good answer. He hated my Carnival idea. Let's move on. In the future, we will have you guys chiming in on this armchair engineering section. We'll gather one idea from you guys over at fyapod.com over on our fourth wall. But we're filming this way in advance. You guys don't even know this is a thing at this point. So in the future, that will be there, though. Moving on. Let's get into the event preview. Let's run down all the things you could look forward to at this year's event. We'll go through these quickly, but I do have some questions for you, Gus.
Sure.
Now, you created 8 Fingers 9, the Boogeyman. That's one of the 2 new mazes this year.
Yes, I did.
So we could start with that. Let me read the maze description, which, by the way, did you write this?
I did.
Amazing. Okay. Step inside a living fairy tale in a colonial township that's under siege by an inhuman monster that preys from the dark. As night descends, 8 Fingers 9 emerges from the shadows in search of fresh meat. His vicious bite penetrates deep, causing sleep paralysis, which holds his victim in sway while he slowly consumes their flesh. Step lively and beware the dark, or you may be the main course at his next meal. I love this. I love a classic boogeyman story. Also, I love, finally, somebody tackling, whether it's in a maze or in horror media at large, the idea of sleep paralysis.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this one's a fun one. I think we touched on a little bit earlier. Like, this is an idea that I had for a very long time, and really this year, sometimes you have the fragment of an idea, like, hey, But for me, it was, I really wanted to go back to give me that one sort of classic villain that the whole maze is tied around. You know, you go back to something like, you know, Pumpkin Eater in recent times, but really the Tooth Fairy, where it's just we're playing with this archetype of what this thing is. And I wanted to do, hey, what's my boogeyman, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to do what had been done, right? I wanted to come up with something new and weird and unique. And when I was kicking around this idea, I started jotting down, and I wrote a poem.
Yeah.
Basically, there's a poem that's sort of like, this is set in colonial times. So we're way back. And the kids of this town have sort of written this poem that is talking about this monster that comes out of the woods and just,
which is great because like that's one of my favorite things in horror, like the kids singing the cautionary tale.
Yeah, so
like 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
Basically, there's a little bit of that. Yeah, but I honestly, I love writing poetry. I really do. And so I wrote this spooky poem, and it sort of helped because I know there's a lot of people like 8 Fingers 9. What in the world are you talking about? This is gibberish. But I wrote a poem, and it really helped inform what the maze was. I created my own Grimm's fairy tales in a sense. So,
which is great because it's almost like a page out of the book of Grimoire, which is the maze you made a couple of years ago.
Right. Yeah. I made that alongside John Aspirin, and I co-designed that one. That was a lot of fun. But this was something different, something I wanted it to feel like we were walking to a storybook. So I wrote this poem, and everything sort of informed from that. So I don't know. Have you heard it? Have you?
No, actually, I honestly, this is so strange for me too, because I live for this event. So while I try and get as much details as I can, I try to avoid spoilers. But at the same time, I don't have access to talking to the dude who actually made the thing. So I'm in this weird crossroads where I do want to hear the poem,
I'm not going to really give spoilers. And I think it's kind of, you talk so much about it. Should I do it in regular voice or spooky voice?
I think whatever moves you.
Whatever moves you. Okay. Oh, gosh. Breathe here. Take heed of the tale of old 8 Fingers 9. Watch well while you sleep, or on your fingers he'll dine. If alarm him you do while he comes for a bite, he'll spare you your digits and quickly take flight. But if you allow him the smallest of taste, you'll enter a slumber and he'll lay you to waste. 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 fingers, 4. Don't even bother with locking the door. 5 fingers gone, and next will come 6. Your flesh he devours, your end won't be quick. 7 fingers now, and 8 fingers 9. The feast's in full swing. The blood flows like wine. And that is
amazing. You really locked in there. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, no, it's
if you read that to me as a kid, I'd have nightmares.
Yeah, so and when we finally, I think over the next probably by the time this is aired, we're gonna have the teaser trailer.
Oh my god, I can't wait for that. That must have been cool to film that.
It was a lot of fun, yeah. But yeah, so that kind of informed the vibe of it. So it really is, it's about I can give you a 2-second backstory that
go for it. Yeah.
But like sure. Cliff Notes version, because I can go for we will be here 4 hours, right? Yeah. The idea is that this is this colonial township, New England town, as the settlers are coming over. There's this boy traveling with his family, and there's an accident with his carriage, and he's orphaned.
Yeah.
So he is taken to the orphanage at the nearest town, and because of the accident, he's nonverbal at this point. He's keeping to himself. He's an extremely intelligent young boy, but he's traumatized from this event, and he goes to this new town. And the people in this orphanage are people who should have moved down a long time ago, and they treat him as an outcast, right? He's bullied, he's treated poorly, and he's eventually taken out to the old woods where no one goes. Yeah. So this town is on the edge of this forest where there's a bad vibe in the forest. No one goes out there. There's no indigenous people out there. Yeah. Just everyone avoids this forest. There's weird shadows that sort of come and go, but it's this place where no one goes. So the bullies from this orphanage take him out there, and they tie him to a tree, and they point their fingers in his face and say that no one is ever going to love you. No one's going to come save you. Yeah. And they leave.
Oh my God.
They leave him to die. So this boy is there, and he's slowly starving over the span of, 8 nights, 9 days. Of course, everything's 8 and 9 because that's just worked out. So as he's slowly dying, starving to death in these woods, he just has this memory of fingers in his face and this intense hunger. Well, as I said before, these are the woods where no one goes, but this is magic woods because, hey, this is my storybook. It's magic, right? It's a grim fairy tale. Give me a break here. I'm going to put some magic. There's good and bad magic in this forest, and this good spirit comes along and sees him in this state, and she decides to bring this boy back, to imbue him with the power of the forest and bring him back to life.
Yeah.
Well, when she does this, unfortunately, because of all that anger and because of that hunger and that need for revenge, he taps into, as he's turning into this woodland spirit, he taps into the negative, all of the bad energies of this wood.
Oh my God.
And he transforms into this monster. So he is immediately transformed into this monster that has the knowledge of all nature immediately, and he has the power of the woods. Yeah. And he's driven by a hatred of this town and a hunger and the memory of those fingers.
Oh my God.
In his face. So he comes back to town and he basically preys on everyone. But because he is of the woods, he's actually able to travel through nature. Yeah. Through wood, through root, through loam. So that's why they say it doesn't matter if you lock the doors, because he's literally can see you through the wood of the walls. Yeah. And he emerges from the wood of the walls.
That's actually funny because it's like, even going back to the Freddy thing, 3 or 4, better lock your door. Don't even matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So he does that. And then his bite, it causes sleep paralysis, and he always starts with the fingers. Oh, so God. So that's where there's some people in town who have lost fingers to this, but like it's been interrupted for whatever reason. He moved on. Yeah. Didn't like the taste. But for some people that aren't so fortunate, they're just devoured. Dude. You just come in, and your loved one is just this pile of bone and mush.
I have to say, this might be your greatest work. It's so epic. Like when you were talking through it, the lasting memory of fingers being pointed in his face, brilliant.
Yeah, it was just like, how do I, for me, it's so much of this is, I'm like I said earlier, I'm creating these dollhouses where I get to play. But you alluded to this. You think of them as movies,
and I think this could be a film.
And that's to me, I'm always looking, how do I tell a compelling story in X amount of chapters, however many rooms, right? That's how many chapters you have. So it's like you're telling a story. To me, I look at these like I'm telling a story in 13 chapters. Yeah, 13 being number pulled out of my head because it's fun and spooky.
Yeah, and it's the number of rooms or whatever.
Yeah, right. But basically that's sort of the ballpark, sometimes 12, sometimes 16. But you're trying to tell the story of this in a series of events that happen room to room. Yeah. So this maze will take you through that. You actually, I wanted to do a very much see it, don't say it. With the storytelling. So in the queue, we are going to have that backstory that leads up to his transformation. Yeah. That's going to be in the queue. But when you get into the maze, you literally will see the transformation happen. Like I have it. So it's this big tree. So
that's awesome.
So you'll see the boy turn into the monster, and then the monster pops out with the Ooga Booga, of course.
No, it's got to be some Ooga Booga. Yeah. And honestly, that's why I like your mazes the most, is that, and I always tell this to people when they go to the event, try and take in the storyline of the maze. I know you're there to get scared. That's fine. But actually being engrossed in the story not only makes it a better experience, more enriching for you, but it also opens you up to getting scared more because you're focusing on the story. Things pop out and you're like, oh, that's right. I'm in the movie right now.
And this one is so fun for me because as you pass through the maze, if you read the OC registry, you saw some of the stuff in there. As you're walking through this maze, you're starting where his transformation at the edge of the woods. You go into the town. And Amazing. You're going through, a home, you go through a shop, you go through the orphanage where he was originally cast out. And then from there, you actually pass into that passageway that separates the natural world from
the way he can travel.
So the way he travels. So that's going to be really fun to explore. You sort of travel how he travels. You see how he sees these environments. Yeah. And then you pop out on the other side into another one of his scenes of gore and horror. But then you travel through the rest of the woods and you see some denizens of the woods that have been there for that traveled the world and in search of magical places. You see some of the people that actually live in this woods and are actively celebrating what he's doing to the town, and then ultimately, as the guest, sort of you're the townsfolk, just sort of seeking that retribution against the monster. So you seek him out at the heart of the woods, and it probably doesn't go well.
This is great. I mean, like, other mazes may not start with table setting of like, here's what you actually need to know to understand the story as you walk through. You did this with Grimoire, and in a really cool way. In Grimoire, it starts with this scene where they're at a campsite. They're telling the story of this book. You actually hear the actors telling the story, and then you enter through the tent and into the world. I remember when that maze came out, I had known that you designed that one, and I came up with all my buddies, and I was like, hey, we're going to meet the maze designer so that you could understand what's going on before, and that made the experience so much better for them. And what's cool about this podcast now is that, like, I'm now telling you, I'm able to table set for everybody that's watching this podcast, and hopefully all of you watching or listening to this could go into these mazes with a greater appreciation for the storytelling on display.
I do want to give a huge shout out to my buddy John Aspirin, one of the other designers. He actually came up with the main concept of Grimoire, and I sort of helped flesh it out. But he set the table for us, and then he was also working on Bloodline at the same time. So like I co-designed Grimoire and saw it through art direction, but I don't want to say, hey man, that's my story.
Yeah, for sure.
That was definitely his, and I helped craft it along the way. But that was another fun one. We put so much work and love into these things, and it's good for me to have fans like you that really just soak it in and appreciate it. Also, on the same train of thought, we've got to have those guys that we need to make it accessible so that as you go through, it still makes sense and it's still a satisfying experience.
Yeah, because you're telling a 3D story too. You're not telling. It's not like a movie where you could tell the audience where to look. They can look anywhere they want. Yeah, and that's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, it's really just for me. It's just you walk into a room, and one of the things I did with Eight Fingers this year was I made it so that there's so many places in this where, with Dark Entities, you were on a ship the whole time. You knew like the next corner you're in a ship. There's so many things. I took that opportunity this year with Eight Fingers 9, where there's so much discovery as you turn a corner. It's just something like, oh, I wouldn't have expected that. Like, it's something completely different. And it's just really playing with that. To your point, like, how do you get them to look where you want them to look? And you give them something you can't look away from. Right. That's what it is. Like, you want them to look there. You make that so compelling that's where their eyes are drawn.
That's how I actually felt when the first time we did Grimoire, because I would have never expected going to a Halloween haunt that you'd be like walking through these like blood-soaked trenches of a war.
That was such a cool scene. Yeah.
But that was once again, like, you just do not expect something like that.
Yeah, that was interesting because, you travel through, the book has you, it's all sort of, there's a little bit of interpretation of how are you really in these spaces. But to me, it's these echoes of these worlds where the Grimoire has been at the center of all of these horrible points in time. Yeah. And you're just sort of going through the ghosts of memories of this book, and you're transported to this nightmare version of it.
Let's move on to the other new maze, which is Widows, and we'll go through the rest of these mazes rather quickly, except for the ones that you've worked on, in which case I'll ask you to say at least one thing about it from either a behind-the-scenes perspective or something cool we should look out for this year.
Absolutely.
Widows, new maze, designed by Daniel Miller. Here's the description of that one. Can you hear that? The spider-possessed residents of the convalescent home are preparing a special place for you. Enter their web and succumb to their dark desires. Basically, this one is like spiders inhabit the bodies of these folks at this like retirement home and then take them over.
Basically, yeah. It's very Daniel. All right.
Here's a quote from him. He said, "I like to take two disparate things and smash them together. I came up with the title first, which was a smash up of spiders and older women."
He's a crack up.
This is a classic "What's Wrong with Grandma" story.
Basically, yeah. But Grandma wants you because she needs to use you to breed more spiders.
Oh my God.
So Grandma needs you, and Grandma wants you to come closer.
You're a twisted man.
Thank you. This is all, I can't take credit for that. That's a Daniel's, but I definitely laughed and said, go for it, man.
Yeah. And then the next we have is, and now going into the rest of the lineup, and these are returning mazes. We have Grimoire, that was 2 years now. This is the third year.
This is the third year.
Is the pre-show returning?
The pre-show is not returning this year. We're trying to find ways to, that really brings very sort of like an interesting side note. I'll be quick about it because I know we could be here all day, but the Grimoire was actually conceived during COVID times. So a lot of those pre-shows and things were meant in like, hey, small groups, we go and we experience this thing and we're doing it. So the challenge is when you design for that space-to-space moments, like I love events that have the luxury of doing that, but really in our flow through, and we're getting like, you get 20,000 people in a night and they all want to experience this thing. You can't unfortunately, the reality is it's really tough to do that. So we have looked though at ways of like, how do we help tell this story in a more streamlined fashion? So you do get that.
Well, you did mention like the queue for the 8 Fingers 9. So because people do have a lot of time to spend.
Yeah, and that's really
queue,
like when you have that sort of, when you can actively engage the people in those spaces to help tell the story, that's a great opportunity to do so. And for me, for 8 Fingers 9, I really wanted to take that and be like, this isn't like you need to do your homework, but if you're waiting anyway, this is a great, build up to the thing.
And we don't have to now. Amazing.
From the source, right?
Grimoire, by the way, just a quick one-liner for this, and you could smack me if this is wrong. This is how I interpreted it. But the Chronicles of a Haunting book and how it has terrified whoever has encountered it. It's almost kind of like this talisman. Is that accurate?
It is pretty much, yeah. This particular story is about these kids who have found the book at a treehouse, and reading from it has wrought terrible things, and they are looking to return it. And again, this is Scary Farm maze, so it probably doesn't go well for them.
It does not. Any new things we could look out for in the maze this year? Because this is half your baby.
Now this year, I think it's really more just refining.
Yeah.
There's not really much in the way of new content. It's just a matter of trying to refine how we get a good throughput and actually get some of that story across.
And I actually like that about Knotts too, that you're able to bring mazes back year after year, especially if they're one of your favorites, and over time they just get better because you can refine the timing and things like that. So I'm excited to get into Grimoire again. Next maze we got is Cinema Slasher. This one was a fun one last year. A knife-wielding murderer is set loose in a theater. These are now my one-liners, by the way. These aren't Knott's official.
There we go.
But I love a classic scare where you walk into a theater and there's a bunch of like fake people sitting in seats, and then of course one of them is real,
of course, made
to torture an anxiety person like me. It's so good. Room 13. This is a crazy cocktail called Devil's Elixir, maybe behind the murders and madness at this extravagant Argive hotel and surrounding area. This is over in the Goring 20s area. This was a fun maze as well. I love a haunted hotel.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Actually, that one probably scared me the most last year. I don't know. Sometimes it's like timing, just like
it's just,
but I don't know, something about that. Yeah.
No, Room 13 does have a couple upgrades that are gonna help. Again, it's just like sometimes in year 2 you look at this and think, hey, how can we refine this to make it a little bit of a smoother or more coherent experience.
Oh, after that we got Origins, The Curse of Calico. This one's been around for a bit now, I feel like.
It sure has. It's classic.
What is that, like 5 years or something at this point?
I don't know. I can't count.
It's a great maze. This is basically exploring the mythology behind Sarah Marshall, the Green Witch, and how she was hanged for being a witch and then came back and
gave
them the business.
Yeah, and it's such a perfect fit for Ghost Town.
It's so good.
It just to have something inside Ghost Town that really just adds to the story of the entire zone like that and just helps, make it just a big complete whole is awesome.
And it's over at the Western Dance Hall.
Wilderness Dance Hall.
Wilderness Dance Hall, sorry. Yes. Over here at the Wilderness Dance Hall, which is always for whatever reason, some of my favorite mazes have always been in that area. This is in Ghost Town. That's where Hatchet High was. It's where Pinocchio Unstrung was back in the day. You made Grimoire, and we already talked about Grimoire, but that's over in the Mystery Lodge.
Yep.
Also home to some of my favorite mazes.
Was that where the Edgar Allan Poe one was?
It was where Evermore was there. And then also, I think 13 Axe Manor was also there back in the day. Mm-hmm. As a maze designer, which spot are you the most stoked to get your maze in?
Man, they all have their perks, right? So Wilderness Dance Hall was fun because I did Red Barn in there.
Oh,
so
incredible.
it was kind of easy to do a barn in a barn, right? And there's this. The backstage mazes are great though because they can be anything.
Yeah,
you can start on them early. You know, there's that permanent structure. So
that's fair. Yeah.
Those are usually I don't want to say the easiest, but they're the most convenient for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, control the elements.
Yeah. It's something like where Chilling Chambers is actually kind of challenging because we're going through old. That side is actually, if you want to go way back in Knott's history, that's the old petting zoo from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Chilling Chambers and, Pumpkin Eater before it, we have a weird structure that was there in that petting zoo area before. So the land mass we have in those areas is more challenging. So there's something to be said for just having a big blank rectangle and going at it.
Yeah. I gotta say the Wilderness Lodge area, I feel like always has like some of my favorite layouts for a maze.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like it, like sometimes you're inside and then like, you're like, what am I doing out? Like you get totally lost. Like You're not in a box.
Yeah, and you know, we've had so many cracks at it. That's the benefit of doing something so many times in the venue. You can always look at an old ground plan and just like, well, what did we use for that footprint? How did that work then? And of course then we do sort of have a little bit in the beginning where we can have open air, and we have the final stretch where you can do open air again.
Moving on, we got Waxworks. This is the last year of this. You said this was a Daniel Miller joint?
It is a Daniel Miller maze, yeah.
This is a classic. I actually have filmed an episode of a now defunct show called Spooky Small Talk, in which I interviewed people or celebrities as they walk through haunted houses, and this was one of the mazes that we had access to. I spent a lot of time in this maze, but this is basically the story of Dr. Augustus Scratch turning people into his creepy wax figures in his creepy museum. It's a blast. There's a lot of really fun scares hidden in here. Enjoy it. It's the last year it's there. Bloodline 1842. This is a battle between Daybreakers, which I believe are humans, right? Or,
no,
are they vampires?
Yeah.
It's like that movie with Ethan Hawke. Do you guys remember that movie, Daybreakers?
No. Anyways, it's a battle between Daybreakers and vampires set in the streets of steampunk neo-Victorian city of Valdonia. At one point, you had guns in this. Do you have guns this year?
No, we do not.
That's fine. It's a great maze. It's massive. There's one room in here that's probably one of the most impressive in the entire event. It's a bar. It's like a tavern that you enter, and it's huge. It's an enormous room. And I remember, I think it was the first year, you could actually order a drink in there, I think. Or am I mistaking that?
I think you could pretend order a drink.
I thought you could. Maybe I was having a couple of myself that night, and maybe I was like, more.
That's
no
possible.
wonder why that bartender wasn't listening to me. They're like, dude, there's no taps here.
It's like that bartender from The Shining.
Exactly. This is a really, really amazing maze, and it's with the fellow you collaborated with as well.
John Aspirin did that one.
A John Aspirin joint. Moving on, we got Mesmer. This is kind of like a hypnotist sideshow kind of themed maze. Mesmer the hypnotist does weird hypnotist shit to you. That's definitely not from Knott's. That's my description.
We're actually going to replace ours with that.
You can have that for free.
Oh.
This is over by Accelerator over in Carnival. I always loved that maze back there because I like the walk. I like walking back to that maze and seeing the choo-choo train.
It's kind of fun. It is neat. And especially going into anytime you have a circus themed thing or a carnival themed thing in Carnival.
Yeah.
It's just fun.
Having a clown chase you into a maze where they could have more clowns attack you is very funny.
I mean, wacky clowns.
And then last but not least, the Chilling Chambers.
Yes.
Pays homage to the first Scary Farm maze back in 1977, 10 Chilling Chambers. A keeper, a caretaker, leads you through a cathedral with classic maze themes with appearances from classic characters and collections of the seasons past. Was this you as well?
I worked on this. The idea for this actually did come from Ted Doherty and John Cook.
Oh, incredible!
And then I collaborated with them on the Knott's level. So I designed the entire asylum portion of it, and I did some of the other adjoining rooms as well. And then I art directed the whole thing. So yeah, we did definitely from very early on. We collaborated on what the rooms would be and what we would pay homage to, and it was a lot of fun.
What's your favorite thing in this maze for folks to look out for?
Oh gosh,
if you could pick one.
The Incredible Thingy. He's a poop.
A poop?
He's a poop. Yeah, way back when we had, I was in charge of props at the time, and Daniel Miller designed a clown maze called Uncle Bobo's Big Top at the Bazaar.
I remember that one.
And, it was all about this sort of like this road to side shyster Uncle Bobo that did his stuff, right? So we were talking about it, and just sort of, Daniel's pretty collaborative, early on in the process. Yeah. And I was like, hey, maybe we should do... Maybe we should do like some sort of callback because this is just a traveling show, right? Maybe there's some callback to, because as a kid, I loved going cross country and just doing all the dumb roadside attractions.
Oh,
right?
Me too. I love
whatever
that.
it is. I still love doing it.
I love a road trip.
We go, I love the fact that like if I go up north, I could still stop in and like, hey, here's a mystery shack or something like it, right? You know. So I was like, hey, maybe we do this thing where, because we're doing a flea circus, we're doing this other stuff. What if we like lead up to something? Like we put all these things, like, hey, there's a sign coming up in like 50 feet or whatever. We do all these signs building up to this point. And then you get there and it's just like some dumb piece of shit. Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's perfect. That's it. And I said, what's it? He's like, no, a piece of shit with googly eyes. I was like, All right. So basically that's how it came. Cause I was thinking like, like a big dumb ball of yarn or something, but no, we landed on a turd with googly eyes as being the thing.
As one does.
So yeah, we had these signs. It's like here, coming up on the incredible thingy, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And it was just these 3 or 4 signs in the maze leading up to it. And then we had these red curtains open up.
Yeah.
And it's literally a poop. It's just like a poop. It was before, emojis were a thing, but it really just looks like a poop emoji with eyeballs on it. And it just had its own little fanfare like.
You should sell a plush version of that.
I have
It'd fly
tried.
off the
Yeah.
shelves.
If Carl from Merch, if you're listening, see, I'm telling you.
There's no way
But
anybody
anyway-
from Knott right now is still listening. You can say whatever you want at this point. We're an hour two.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you go through the clown portion and you go into the elephant trailer, there's big elephant butts because of course we needed the big elephant butts. But on the right side, and I'm told he has his own light this year too.
Yeah.
They're bringing focus directly on him. There's the incredible thingy in all of his glory.
It's good that he got his own starlight.
I insisted upon it.
Moving on to the scare zones. This is we got the classics here: Ghost Town Streets, The Gauntlet. We have the Goring 20s returning. There's something about a secret password. I'm not sure what that's about. You could tell Bouncer. Carnival.
It's a secret.
Forsaken Lake, where we have some swamp creatures. It's always been kind of swamp adjacent over there. Moving on to shows. We have Les Magnifiques Carnaval du Grotesque. That's a spooky kind of Cirque du Soleil type show. We have Conjurers, which is a magic show.
Yes, it is.
I love magic.
Yeah, this year's actually pretty neat because
That's at the Birdcage.
Yeah, it's always at the Birdcage. Well, not always at the Birdcage, but it's lived at the Birdcage for a long time. But this year we actually do have a different magician every single week.
Yeah.
So like
that's
every week of the
incredible.
run for pass holders, you're going to see a different musician.
That's awesome.
Musician? A different magician will be entertaining every week. So that's really cool.
And then we have obviously the Hanging, which by the way, do you guys think you'll ever bring back Puppet Up? Because I loved Puppet Up.
I don't know. I think Puppet Up had a great run.
Yeah.
And now we're exploring different things. But again, like never say never on anything.
But the Hanging, talking about the Hanging, it's called the Hanging Eras Tour.
Yeah.
Eras Tour. This is obviously a playoff of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, which, by the way, great show. I went to it. It was awesome. But I'm so excited to see how you guys kind of lampoon that, because that's what the Hanging is about. It's about anybody who's in pop culture. You poke a little fun at them. You're punching up. This is a quote from Jeff Tucker, he writes that show and has for a long time. Anybody that's popular is getting skewered in the show. There will be some Taylor Swift references, but not enough to have the Swifties descend upon us, hopefully, but enough to make them want to buy the t-shirt. End quote. Very good. And then also another quote from Tucker. The show has been taken over by a new supervisor who is using AI to create a better show. You'll definitely recognize the new supervisor. I love that you guys are tackling AI in this show, of just like AI is ruining the show.
It's
awesome.
It's actually, I did the scenic design for the set of The Hanging this year.
Oh, amazing. I'm so excited to watch The Hanging this year. Also, Tucker, just a little fun tip for you guys. Best seats are in the back. You need to sit in the back to get the full spectacle. That's a quote.
It's really just the way the venue was built.
Yeah.
It was just, if you're right in the front, your view is limited as far as like the stuff that's in it.
The stage is high up.
It's a strange venue.
But I'm very excited to watch this year. And then last but not least, we have Yours Cruelly, the Elvira experience. This is not her actually there, but it's going to be showing highlights of all her different eras and decades. She will be doing 3 signing events and 2 panel discussions. The panels will be on the 18th and 20th of October, with signing sessions following that. And then the panel discussions are going to be open to all Scary Farm visitors. And the 3rd signing session without a panel will be on opening night, September 19th. So if you are an Elvira fan, make sure you go to the event those nights, which I'm sure will be a hot ticket because she's almost synonymous with the history of Not Scary Farm. And now let's move on to the final phase of this podcast, which is normally the world-class test, but today it's questions from you guys for Gus, and I've gathered them on my very fancy phone here. Starting with Ellie Joel Lee on Instagram. What is the process in making a maze at a professional level, and what software is used to design it?
Well, that's a good question. Well, the process is, we kind of touched on a little earlier. We come up with ideas, right? Everything starts with an idea.
Yeah.
The idea, we generally, if we feel good enough about it, we'll come up with like a 1 or 2 page, just sort of like, hey, this is it. This is our shot.
Yeah.
So we submit that to management. From there, they'll look it over and say, okay, this one and this one, hey, flesh this out a little more. So then from there, we create the more, the next version of that, which is, a room to room layout, what the vibe is and everything. So we flesh it out a little more. And at that point, we just sort of sit and wait and hope, right?
Yeah.
So they'll get their pitches that are what eventually becomes Scary Farm mazes in a form that's like, hey, this is the story. This is the journey we take. These are the notable scares. This is why this is an important menu. Like, this is how we're looking to push new technology or using good technology. Anything that you think is going to be worth mentioning about the creation of the maze or the actual execution of the maze you put in there. So then you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait.
I'm sorry. What month does this usually start?
October. I mean, yeah.
October, you meaning October this year, you start planning for next year?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, Daniel already has several
makes sense
ready to go. And we've always got like the old ones that we have in our pockets that we're trying to punch up. I haven't like jumped into any new ones yet just because I've been so busy with getting Eight Fingers 9 up and running. And I got some stuff kicking around and I'm itching to do it, but I'm like, I gotta focus.
Which is crazy because this year hasn't even started yet.
I know. It's wild. From there, when we get the green light, really everybody has a different approach, like how they do it. But I kind of start mapping out at this point in the process. I will know what the story is by rooms. Yeah. So I'll start looking at the ground plan and like blocking out what they are. Now, the software we use to create the mazes themselves is Vectorworks. It's a pretty beefy 2D, 3D architectural program, and it handles everything we need it to do. Now, for the most part, all of the walls, all of the architecture, we draft in 3D.
Gotcha.
So we can actually show you a 3D model of the maze. Like, we don't go as deep as, all prop placement and things like that, but we do all of the drafting in 3D so that we know it fits and we can show you. Yeah, it's really cool. From there, we have it get vetted by various people, and we do all of the build plates and build elevations out of that software so that the teams all know what to build. And the designers, we create the lists for all of the other disciplines, all the departments. So we create our props list, we create our audio list, we create our effects list, we create, our lantern trigger list, which is, we can touch on that in a bit. But we do all of that. So just maze designer, like, it's so all encompassing. And we're even sometimes, we're working with our directors of the films to like the video in maze content. Depending on how the needs are, we're writing the scripts for that stuff. Yeah. So then we write talent scripts and then we meet with the talent. It's wild.
Which, by the way, this comes from Aiden Williams 968. How did the idea of the lanterns come about? And could you say what the lantern idea is? And then also, how did it come about?
Well, that's a heck of a segue. Well, the idea for the lanterns, obviously, we're always looking at tech and how we can move the event forward and make it more immersive and entertaining. We have in the past used some tech. If you go way back to our skeleton key rooms, we were experimenting with different technology there. But we had a couple, and you mentioned, we talked about trick or treat lights out earlier, where that was tech. So the lanterns are kind of a progression of what that technology is. And it really was the lantern is, personally, it's great for us as Scary Farm because the conductor is sort of the one who peers our talent, the conductor. He sees through the veil on all sides. So having a lantern similar to the conductors be what you take around as a guest is pretty awesome, right?
And what maze is this in?
The lanterns actually are functional in every single maze and scare zone.
Oh, wow.
So if you have a lantern, it basically has a send and receive on it.
Yeah.
And the mazes, we try to limit the lantern interaction because we don't want guests doing a hunt and seek in a maze with a lantern, because then if talent tries to pop out and scare you and all he does is bash his face on your lantern, you have a broken person, you have a broken lantern, you have an unhappy guest, right? Yeah. So the lanterns are really cool because as you go through scare zones, they will be, we can affect what the lantern's color is, what the vibe is. So the new maze, Eight Fingers 9, I worked some more lantern integration into that. So as you pass through certain things, maybe this light will chase as you go through with a lantern.
Wow. I had no idea it was park wide. I thought this was limited to one maze. That's awesome.
No, the lanterns are park wide. Last year we sold out real early. The lanterns sold out within by the end of the third week, I believe.
Oh my God.
The lanterns this year do have a little bit of fun new tech to them. So they have like sort of a tag feature. If you want to play a game with other guests, like you can change the color, but I think that's selectable on your own.
Yeah. So can you bring an old lantern back?
If you have one of last year's lanterns, yes, you can bring it back on farm and use it this year. There are certain functions of the new lantern that the old lantern can't do, but you will still have the same experience with that old lantern.
So awesome. Next question is Keenan Ben. Is there an ideal amount of time you aim to keep people stuck in the maze?
Well, it's usually a walkthrough is about 5 minutes, somewhere in that range. It really depends on the length of the maze. Sometimes you opt for a longer, more claustrophobic maze. Like Dark Entities was a good example of a maze that just you were in that ship for a while. You were in it for a hot second. It's just in how you design it, how many footsteps you take through it, and that experience. But generally, you can expect to be in these things, anywhere from like 5 to 7 minutes.
Makes sense. Forever Gulia says, what is the first thing that you consider when designing a new maze?
Is the idea good? I mean, honestly, like for me, it's just, I cannot tell you how many times somebody's like, hey, you know what you should do for a maze? You should do this. And like, well, now I kind of don't want to do that for a maze because I can't, right? Like if you give me this crazy specific pitch and I do that, like I can't do that, right? Because then it's like, I gave him that idea. So that's always a challenge. Sometimes people are like, hey, I got a great maze idea. I'm like, no, I don't want to hear it. But really for me, it's, and everybody's process is different, but what is about that idea that says, this is what I want to walk through? Is this an experience that I want to do? Is this a story that I want to tell people? And is this a journey I personally want to take? If that idea is compelling, and is it creepy? Like, what is it about it that makes this unique and different and scary and just wild, right? Yeah. So it's just the idea, like, is it something has to call to me? And, it's hard to put it any differently because it could just be different things. And, in even like 1 year you could feel this, or
no, for sure.
Today I'm into blazers, but tomorrow I might be a crop top guy, right? It's just,
I could see you as a crop top guy.
Maybe you will. I don't know what next year brings, but it's really, I don't know if that's a good answer, but it could be anything. It just has to spark something in me.
And that's fair. I think that goes with anything creative. Moving on to Droovy Lorraine. What's the funniest story you have from the job?
Oh gosh, there's some really ridiculous stories.
Because you were also a talent in the maze too, so I imagine.
Oh man, I think some of my funniest moments are just the dumbest moments.
Yeah, as always. Yeah,
I can't really say funniest without putting people in a bad light on their misfortunes, but sometimes I'm a human being and I laugh very much at other people's misfortunes when they happen in a humorous way. Yeah. That's the entire internet, right? Yeah. But let me just say, I will say the most satisfying thing for me though is just sitting at the end of a maze and watching people come out having enjoyed themselves.
That's gotta feel awesome.
That is like the most satisfying thing. And as far as funniest, if I think of something else that was really funny that doesn't feel like I'm picking on somebody, I'll share it.
You could email it to me and then I'll put it in the comments.
Sure, that sounds good.
Brandalorian_DeLorean. Cool name. How long does making a new maze take? Is there an archive of unused ideas? We've already talked about how long a maze takes. Or we kind of did.
Well, in a way, generally you can expect to, if you really just sit down and hammer it out, you'd love to have about 3 months to just really do then that's start to finish. But
that's not a lot of time too. That's gotta be tough.
But that's the focus time. But even if you have that 3 months, there's always like, on my way, down before I came down here, I'm answering tons of questions about this. So there's a focused design time that you really just need to hammer it out, but the job doesn't stop when that's done because we're art directed. So basically the job goes from when we start it till when we open.
And is there an archive of unused ideas? Like in Hollywood, there's like a blacklist of scripts that haven't gotten produced yet.
It's really just one pagers and things like that. That's not awesome. There's very few things that have ever gone. There are some, I don't want to say there's none, but there aren't very many things that have gone full term. Yeah. And then didn't happen.
Next one is really cool. It comes from Will.Brandenberger. And it's because I did not tell the folks over on our social at FYA Pod who we were interviewing. But this person starts the question with, "Hi, Gus." But they also said, "Hi, Gus / Daniel." They were like, they're hedging. Yeah. Can you explain how you guys choose the soundscapes in your mazes?
Yeah. It's Spotify. Honestly, like you find a vibe, and mine are usually kind of unique because I don't really go with, I think, what people would expect my mazes to sound like. Last year for Chilling Chambers, it was collaborative with John and Ted and I, but it was really like, hey, let's find some, the Midnight Syndicate type spooky vibe. Yes. But this year my choice is pretty wild.
Midnight Syndicate, by the way, does a lot of the soundscapes, almost all of them for Halloween Horror Nights over at Universal.
Yeah, and they're great for that classic vibe. But yeah, mine, I don't think anyone would ever. I don't want to give away what mine is this year, like the sound of it, but I don't think anyone would have ever figured, oh, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, it's just.
You're playing the Eras tour, right?
100%. Yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm on the Billie Eilish side.
Oh, you're on the Billie Eilish
No,
side.
I'm getting torched in your.
Yeah.
I'm totally getting torched in the comments right now. Listen,
we're in the renaissance of pop right now.
I got a Swiftie daughter, and my other one loves Billie Eilish.
What about Chappell Roan? We got some Chappell Roan, some Sabrina Carpenter. I love all of them. They're all great. They're making great stuff.
My brother's way into Chappell Roan, so
I love Chappell Roan.
Yeah, she's pretty fun. My choices have been pretty out there because even going back to Gunslingers, they're like,
yeah, I love Gunslingers.
They're like, here's my music, and it's just this most aggressive thing. It was one of Nick Cave's side bands that he did, and it was just this real aggressive line that goes through, and they're like, that doesn't sound like a cowboy maze.
Well, you kind of need loud music when you're by Silver Bullet.
Yeah, that was don't.
Wait, was that the same maze that had the piano jingle to Mad World in the background? I loved that.
It's funny because people have like, I can't find that anywhere because we originally it was Mad World, and then when we switched to the werewolf theme, we did Bad Moon Rising.
Yeah,
so like that. But
that's
no,
awesome.
It was just the pianist at Knott's did that.
Oh, I didn't catch the Bad Moon Rising on the piano. That's so fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. But yeah, so it was just literally our pianist recorded that for us, and we had it there just for that.
That's so kick ass. That was like one of my oldest memories of the
how fun.
The haunt was, and just again, it was
oh my god, that was you have a really talented pianist.
Thank you. We're very proud. But no, it's really, and again, it's just like, to me, that's storytelling in the music, right? Just the choice of Mad World was just like, this place is bananas, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted, to me, in Gunslingers, that saloon was always this respite where it didn't matter how many people were getting shot outside. They did not give a crap. They're like, we're just living our life here. Right? We're doing a thing.
And for our viewers and listeners, like this rendition of Mad World, it's like, you'd have to kind of like stop to like digest it for it. Cause it's basically, it's like a very high tempo.
Yeah.
It was a jaunty piano. Like you'd find it in an old Westy thing.
Like,
yeah, it was great. It was great. But no, for me, it's just, what's the vibe I want to get? And then I try to find that music. I mean, Red Barn was German industrial music.
As it would be.
Yeah. So people were like, where did you choose this? And I'm like, no, really, just go to like, the 10-minute mark of the song from here to here, and we'll leave that, and
that's
it was
awesome.
Just, yeah.
aMAZEing Herd says, have you ever needed to change a scare because it was actually too intense?
We wouldn't want to do that because out of choice, but there's been some things that people have sort of flagged as maybe we shouldn't do that. But usually that stuff sort of gets ferreted out before it meets the guess.
Caitlin Novak says, how can I get hired?
Well, to do what I do is really tricky. And I don't, not to say that in a discouraging way, but the best way to really get your foot in this is just through one of our take theater, learn the basics, learn how to, take some shop classes. But every year we do hire seasonally for all of our different disciplines, the build crews. And that's a great way to get your foot in the door.
Gratuitous Theme Parks, friend of the pod. He's been on the pod. He covered Figment with us. This is probably more a question for Daniel. How many fart effects are too many fart effects for a maze?
That's a very John question.
I have 0 fart effects in my new maze. I'm sorry.
You just have the poop.
The poop is in Chilling Chambers. Oh, well, but the elephants fart at the same time. I mean, it really depends, like, what purpose are the farts serving, right? I mean, like, I think that for Daniel and I, we have varying fart levels of acceptability. I think, just hammer it home and then you're good. But like at some point, it's just like anything. If it's always the same thing, you kind of got to make sure you're not losing the power of the poop or the fart joke. So use it sparingly, but use it hard. Fart hard. Sure.
You got to fart hard.
Fart hard. If you're going to do it, don't be like farting all day, because then you're that guy that just stank up the room all day.
That was the alternate title for Dewey Cox. Walk Hard. It was
Fart
Dewey
hard.
Cox, Fart Hard, but I prefer that one. Molly4D says, how is people flow factored into where the scares are placed?
Well, we take it all into account. I mean, really, like, we try to keep the rooms immersive in the sense of like, you're not always we don't expect you to turn around and look, but the room still feels like a full thing. Yeah. But yeah, it's all factored into, as you walk in, we want to give the talent a place to be hidden from your sight. Yeah. And then, we decorate it's everything. Like guest flow through a maze is everything on how we do it. Because even, yesterday I'm looking at the maze and I placing tombstones as you do, right? And I'm just looking, and then I walk back to see where in the guest path, what's the discovery of these and how do they look? And as I walk through there, so it's if you're not catering to the eyes as they see the event, then you're wasting energy.
Makes sense. This comes from Kiori the Okapi. Can you make less scary? And it has a little sad emoji.
I believe that's called Spooky Farm. That's our big we do have they do have a Nobu bracelet or necklace that you can get. They do? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you're, and that, man, we introduced that last year and it got a lot of heat. And I didn't understand the heat just because that doesn't change your experience as a guest.
No, it doesn't.
Right?
If someone
it's just
has
it's just people got to be macho, right? But really what that does is it just sort of, if a talent sees that, they're not going to target you and scare.
Yeah, if it doesn't affect your experience and somebody wants to be able to participate, but this is maybe a bit too much, I think that's a really cool compromise.
Yeah, and I think too that there's people who like, hey, maybe their kids are like really, really want to go and they're testing it out the first time. Like that's a great thing for a kid,
Oh, that's true.
You can get it, put it on, and if the kid feels good, then take it off. Or maybe like you're the dad that's like, hey, I'm a chaperone and this isn't my thing. And like, I know that like the next Booga Booga guy, if the next Ooga Booga I get is going to get a knuckle sandwich. Yeah. Maybe the bracelet or the necklace is good for you. I think that if you're looking for a way to experience this, but maybe not have it be so tough on you, the necklace is a way to go.
We could get one of you. I want one of the necklaces for you, Byron.
No.
We'll get a Nobu for Pooh.
I like the full experience.
He's a full boo necklace kind of.
He's a full boo.
Although I gotta say, if I saw a group of people standing in front of me in a line with all those necklaces on, I'd be like, oh man, I'm waiting extra for these people that might have otherwise stayed home.
Yeah, or do you go enough behind them that you know that like the talent isn't really reacting, so the talent might come into you better.
You should make a full boo
More
necklace.
The merrier.
A full boo necklace where you could like, I want you to smack me.
And don't let merch hear that.
And the last question we have here comes from @Ryan Bergara. What is your favorite maze of all time?
My favorite maze my favorite Scary Farm maze that I always go back to is Delirium.
Oh man, Delirium kicked
Delirium
ass.
Was wild. That was one where I wasn't in design yet. I was still head of the props department. And Delirium was where that actually was an idea that Daniel had for many years, and it had been designed in a different venue actually.
That was in the Gauntlet, or no?
Delirium was in our backstage. Oh geez. I hate that microphone. I just touched it. Delirium was in the backstage warehouse where Dark Entities wound up being.
Oh, yes.
Now, Delirium, this is a fun fact. Delirium was actually designed for the space that turned into the Grudge. So Delirium was originally scheduled to be in Fiesta Village. At Fiesta Plaza. And fun fact number 2, a few of the ideas that wound up in the Grudge maze were actually modified ideas from that original version of Delirium.
So even like Quarantine was because Quarantine was back there too, right?
Yeah, Quarantine was in Fiesta Plaza as well. But Delirium got sidetracked when the Grudge deal came through, and some of those ideas from Delirium wound up actually being used in the Grudge.
Gotcha.
So when the idea came up for Delirium to come back again, it was, those ideas obviously didn't carry over. So it became a new thing. And we were in that backstage warehouse. And I really felt like Delirium was the first one where we, and me and my team at the time specifically, just went all in on just creating a fully fleshed out, realized environment.
Yeah.
And it was like some of the ideas in there were wild. You were going through a little girl's nightmares, basically.
That was the maze that also featured that eyeball room, right?
Yeah.
God, that room was freaky.
Yeah, the eyeball room was in there, which the eyeball room actually carried over to Tooth Fairy.
Yeah.
Which was fun. And I know people that just hated that hall.
I hated that room.
The hall and Tooth Fairy?
No, I mean, it scared the shit out of me.
Yeah,
I don't like things with a lot of eyes.
Yeah. So Delirium would have been I feel like it was a stepping stone for us to do more as an event. And it was just so cool. And it was such a weird thing that it's always been real special to my heart.
My favorite maze is Paranormal Inc., I think.
That's a great one.
It was the first year that came out, my mind was blown by that.
Yeah, that was really like everything in the kitchen sink went in there, and it all worked in spades. It just was amazing.
Well, either way, that takes us to the end here. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I know
no problem.
we recorded long here because we talk a lot, but this has been a true honor and a treat to get the insight behind the event at large, but also this year's event. I can't wait to check out 8 Fingers 9.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
I'll probably see you at the farm at some point.
Yeah, you got my digits.
I do got your
You got my digits?
I got all 10 of them.
Oh, damn.
Until 8 Fingers 9 gets them.
Yeah, well, no guarantees.
Is there anything that, I mean, I guess there's not really, I was going to say, normally this is where we ask the guest, is there anything you'd like to plug? But we've plugged it.
Yeah, I think I just spent 2 hours plugging
We done
things.
plugged it.
We plugged it. I don't know, man. I just, thanks to everybody that's listened to this point. I love talking about this stuff, and I love, just talking through the process. It's fun for me. I really do enjoy not only creating these things, but getting to have these moments to really talk about it and
nerd
just
out.
go,
Yeah,
it's fun, So thanks for listening. Thanks for being a fan. If you're not a fan, what are you waiting for? Go be a fan.
Yeah, hopefully you could come check it out. Not Scary Farm starts September 19th. It's going to be running, Wednesdays through Sundays, pretty much till the end of October.
I'm not sure which Wednesdays were active, but I'm also, just check the calendar.
Just check the calendar. It's running a lot of nights from September 19th, pretty much to the end of October. Actually, is there some November dates this year?
Just check the calendar. My focus is September 19th, man.
That's something I should have done.
He's not running scheduling.
Anyways, that does it for this episode of For Your Amusement. If you're watching, make sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if you're just listening, please rate the podcast 5 stars and subscribe as well. You could support us by joining our fourth wall and becoming a park hopper, as we're calling it, by heading over to fyapod.com. Get you some access to our 3 bonus shows, but also help us keep making this podcast. And you also find our merch there. Follow the pod socials at fyapod everywhere. I'm at Ryan Bergara everywhere, but Twitter where I am at Ryan S. Bergara. And Byron is at Byron A. Marin across all socials. Gus, what's your social?
Basically, I really only have Instagram. It's The Power of Gus.
The Power of Gus. And you can follow Gus there. He actually posts a lot of cool, behind the scenes stuff there as well. Thank you guys for spending your time with us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you all on the next run.
See you at Scare School.
We'll see you at Scare School, where I'll be doing Ooga Booga.
All of the Ooga Booga 24/7.
All right, see you guys later. Bye.